Chapter 295. Senior Apprentice Brother Xiaobai. Chui frowned, a trace of hesitation flashing across her face. She took a step forward as if she wanted to pull him back. Zhu Yao took a step to the side and cut in, blocking her line of sight. You. Chui looked at her angrily, displeased that she had been stopped. I say, this martial grandniece. Zhu Yao chuckled at her, and then she glanced at Yi Qingcong at the side. How about you conduct yourself? He couldn't be too greedy. Some things couldn't be given, so it was best to make it clear. My hometown has a special name for this kind of person. It's not a nice name. You definitely won't like it. It's called green tea bitch. I hope you're not one of them. So if you can't promise me anything, at least let him go. If you don't like him, don't ruin him, okay? After all, he's your senior martial brother with whom you've had a relationship for more than 10 years. This kind of unclear, seemingly liking, but also not liking, was the most hurtful. Chuyi's face was a little pale. She seemed to understand something and slowly lowered her head. I will explain clearly. He wasn't completely hopeless. Grand uncle. Yi Qingcong was a little anxious. He took a step forward. Don't misunderstand. Stop. Zhu Yao raised her hand and made a pause gesture, stopping him from explaining. There's no need for you to tell me. You should tell little Bai. Whatever you decide, it has nothing to do with me. But you better make it clear to him. If it drags on for too long and causes Xiaobai to cry. Her tone changed and her voice turned cold. I will beat you up. After saying that, he didn't care about their expressions and turned around to follow the stupid red-crowned crane that was still circling in the sky. Chui was destined to be Yi Qingcong's sister. Even if the plot had changed, the two of them still ended up together. Therefore, Xiaobai was destined to become cannon fodder. They were still young, and their relationship had just budded. Rather than suffering pain in the future, it was better to withdraw from the relationship before it became too deep. It was better to suffer short-term pain than long-term pain. It wasn't appropriate for her to directly intervene in this kind of matter, so she could only give an appropriate reminder. As for Chu Yi, he could see through her heart with a single glance. On one hand, he could not bear to part with his childhood sweetheart relationship with Xiaobai. On the other hand, she was moved by Yi Qingcong. She herself was a little confused, but she didn't want to let go of either side. She originally wanted to drag it out until she could make a decision on her own. But at that time, he was afraid that one of them would be thoroughly injured. That was why she provoked her. Sister Chu Yi was not born a bad person and could understand what she was saying. Seventh elder sister, catch it. Just as Zhu Yao returned to Skybound Peak, a green ball pounced towards her. She raised her hand and took over. Daodu, P called out. It snuggled into her embrace with all its might, while Lil cried. Water began to pour out of it, drenching her. Was she crying? What's wrong? A small phoenix with short claws rushed out of the house, its whole body covered in red fluff. His eyes lit up as he looked at Lil P, who was in her hands. He used all his strength to rub his little wings on his chubby body. Finally, with a flash of light, a fist-sized ball of fire appeared. It immediately waved its wings towards her. Seventh elder sister, hold on tight. I'm going to roast it. P shivered, and more water came out of her body, drenching her like a boiled chicken. Zhu Yao immediately snapped her fingers, extinguishing the sparks that little Eighth had painstakingly produced. She looked at him with a stern expression. Little Eighth, stop fooling around. Seventh elder sister, you're biased. Little Eighth complained, pointing at the pea in her hands. You're not even letting me eat a single pea. You're abusing an underage little animal. Zhu Yao flicked her finger towards his forehead, and little Eighth was instantly sent flying like an angry little bird. It was the red one. Enough. P had just awakened his spiritual consciousness not long ago, so his intelligence is limited. Stop scaring him all day long. Little Eighth rolled a few rounds before crawling back up. He indignantly glanced at the pea in her hands, snorted coldly, and turned his head away. However, he did not chase after her relentlessly. I'll let you off today. He gave a I'm giving face to my seventh elder sister. Look, Zhu Yao felt a slight headache. She wondered what was wrong with this little eighth. Usually, he looked fine. According to his 2 lifetimes, even if he was not considered an adult, he could still be considered a young phoenix. Yet, the moment he saw P, he would go crazy, thinking of various ways to scare him to the point of jumping up and down. In the beginning, it was still all right. He was only the size of a palm, and even if he wanted to chew on it, he couldn't be bothered with him. In the past few days, he had grown a full size, and his godly energy had recovered a little as well. Thus, he began to have wicked thoughts. 7th elder sister. Little 8th once again rubbed against her with his short claws and said mysteriously, "Say, when do you think the far ancient high god will come out from this stupid pea?" When? Naturally, it would be when she calls him master. Zhu Yao sized little 8th up. "Why are you asking this?" He slightly turned his head away and said a little flustered, I just have some things I want to ask him. He's a high god, so he definitely knows everything." Zhu Yao frowned. "Little 8th, he's not the far ancient high god." Little 8th was startled and then anxiously said, "He's clearly the high god, and 7th elder sister calls him master as well. How can he not be?" "He's indeed my master." Zhu Yao sighed and explained, "But he's not my master. He's my master, Yu Yin, not the far ancient high god. Master, he..." She paused for a moment, and then slowly said a moment later, "Master is no longer around." Little 8th lowered his head in disappointment. His entire bird was a little dispirited, and he lightly muttered, "The high god is no longer around. Then who am I supposed to ask? Just what do you want to ask?" Zhu Yao stroked his feathers. "Tell 7th elder sister. Perhaps I might know." Little 8th raised his head and glanced at her, before immediately turning away. He continued to mutter, "TCH, a phoenix as handsome as me doesn't even know. How would you know when you're so ugly?" Zhu Yao raised her hand and slapped towards his bird head. "What kind of words are you talking about?" "Aya." Little 8th hugged his head with his 2 wings and leaped a few steps away. With a reproachful look, he said, "7th elder sister, you can't blame me for being ugly, right? Ha, my bad temper. If you have the guts, don't run." The little red bird slipped away and instantly disappeared without a trace. "Don't let me catch you again." Zhu Yao glared at the direction it escaped to, and then looked at PP in her hand. Just when she was about to call her master out to discuss some matters, her divine sense unintentionally scanned someone outside the door, and it was even someone she was familiar with. "Grand Marshal Ant, Disciple Yi Qingsong has something important to discuss with you." "Why is the bugged student here? Didn't they just separate earlier?" Zhu Yao's heart was filled with doubts. Keeping the PP, she walked out. Yi Qingsong was currently waiting outside the door, though his brows were tightly furrowed, looking as though he had a lot on his mind. It couldn't be because of girly Chu-yi, right? Could it be that girly Chu-yi abandoned him and chose Little Bai? This doesn't make sense at all. Grand Marshal Ant. Seeing her come out, Yi Qingsong's brows relaxed a little. He respectfully bowed to her. "Is there something you need from me? Say it then. What's there to be unhappy about? Say it to cheer her up." He was the best at consoling a broken-hearted youth. Yi Qingsong hesitated for a moment, and then said with a conflicted look, "There's something this disciple can't shake in his heart. I hope that Grand Marshal Ant can guide me." "What is it?" His brows furrowed even tighter. He looked at his surroundings a little anxiously, as though he was afraid of something. Zhu Yao placed down a formation with a wave of her hand, isolating their auras and figures. She silently shook her head in her heart. Youngsters these days are so prideful. Why don't they think about it? It's not like you're a superstar. Who would be interested in your love life? Can you tell me now? Yi Qingsong gritted his teeth. As though he had finally made up his mind, he took out a round cup-like mystic artifact from his bosom. The token of love with girly Chu-yi? Why did she feel it looked a little familiar? Granny, to tell you the truth, back then in that secret realm, after Senior Marshal Brother Little Bai and I got separated from you, I accidentally picked this up. I picked it up by accident. Zhu Yao was startled, as she fiercely stared at that cup-shaped mystic artifact. Medicine King Cauldron. The hell? Wasn't this the male lead's pellet refining godly artifact? Granny recognizes this item? Yi Qingsong's face was filled with shock. Not only did she recognize it, she had already seen it countless times in the scenario. All right. The Medicine King Cauldron can increase the success rate of pellet refining by 30%, and it can be considered as a divine artifact. Since you're able to shrink it to such a small size, most likely, you have already formed a blood contract with it, and it can be stored in your divine sense, right? Yi Qingsong was startled for a moment, as though he did not expect that she would know about it so clearly. You picked this thing up in the secret realm. A place like that. Zhu Yao glanced at him and continued. You want to ask me? You want to ask me if forming a blood contract with it will affect you in any way? Yi Qingsong's face paled, and he immediately explained. Granny, I didn't intentionally hide it from you. It's just that I wasn't clear on what it was in the beginning. My blood had unintentionally sprinkled onto its body, and only recently did I realize that it was in my divine sense. Don't be nervous. Zhu Yao found it a little funny. It's not like you have the obligation to report everything to me. I won't blame you. Granny. He had a conflicted look, as though he did not know what to say. All right. Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders. This was something that belonged to him in the first place, and after going around in circles, it was still picked up by him. Don't worry, that pervert in the secret realm. I'm talking about that heretic practitioner who refines beasts. Although he's not a good person, this is a good item, so you can keep it at ease. There isn't any bad aura on it either, so I believe it won't affect you in any way. In the future, you have to become a pellet refinement master, you know? Yi Qingsong was startled, as though he never expected that she would so easily resolve the matter that he had been worried about for such a long time. Actually, ever since he bound this cauldron, he faintly sensed that it was an extraordinary item. However, he was afraid that it would harm his body, so he had been hesitating on whether he should reveal this matter. Would it attract the covetous eyes of others? He did not have anyone he could trust by his side either. After hesitating for a long time, he realized that he could only ask his granny, who had been protecting him throughout the entire journey in the secret realm. He thought that if he were to say it, even if she would not have any ill intentions, at the very least, she would be a little angry at his act of hiding it from her. He never expected that she would not mind it in the slightest and would brush it off so easily. In her eyes, there was not even a single hint of desire. It was as though no matter how heaven-defying an item he picked up, it would have nothing to do with her. At that moment, his heart was filled with joy, yet he faintly felt a hint of indescribable disappointment. Granny, actually, other than this cauldron, I picked up something else as well. He could not help but blurt out the words that he was not prepared to say even if he was beaten to death. Something else? It couldn't be that pellet ancestor's inheritance, right? He then took out a small jade tablet. Inside are pellet refining methods and a few pellet recipes. Oh, as expected, it's that inheritance. Work hard, young man. Yi Qingsong was startled and was a little doubtful. That's it? Zhu Yao sized him up in a strange manner. What else do you want? You can't be asking me to sponsor you, right? That's right, at the very least. He called her Granny. Gritting her teeth, she silently took out a piece of spirit stone tile. She had dug it out from the floorboards of the great hall with much difficulty and stuffed it into his hands. With a heavy tone, she said, Young man, I can only support you up to here. Why don't you go buy some medicinal ingredients to level up? He looked at her as though he was dumbfounded. Could it be that it was still not enough? Hey, you have to learn to be content, young man. I really don't have any left. I still have to return and dig at the floorboards. It's really troublesome. Yi Qingsong looked at her dumbfoundedly for a moment, and then he suddenly burst out into laughter. The more he laughed, the louder he laughed. In the end, he laughed so hard that he was about to bend over. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Why did she feel a little displeased? Hey, young man, that's enough. Leaving some face for his elders. What was with him laughing like that? Granny, you... He finally managed to stop his laughter and shook his head. With a hint of understanding and a hint of self-mockery, he said, Granny, You really make Qingcang feel ashamed of my inferiority. Earlier, he was actually worried that she would covet his things, and was worried that she would kill him and steal his treasures. Looking at it now, it was extremely laughable. Or perhaps only people with dark hearts would think that others were the same as them, right? Is there anything else? Zhu Yao glared at him a little displeased. He took a deep breath, straightened his expression, and respectfully bowed to her. Thank you, Granny, for your teachings. What did I teach you? This disciple shall take his leave. However, he did not plan on saying anything else as he turned around and headed down the mountain. He left behind a confused Zhu Yao. Just what in the world was this guy doing here? Was he purposely showing off his cheat? Amazing. As expected, bugs were really annoying. This time, what are your plans? A white figure appeared next to Zhu Yao. Yu Yin glanced at the departing figure and then reached out to stroke his disciple's hair. Just as he was about to let go, after pondering for a moment, he took the opportunity to hold onto her hand and intertwine their fingers. Master! Zhu Yao turned around and pounced over. Her heart was so tired that she leaned on his shoulder. She needed some motivation. Youngsters nowadays are getting harder and harder to deal with. Why? Zhu Yao pouted. He's a good person. Chapter 296. That's not it either. Zhu Yao shook her head. I just faintly feel that, even without Yi Qingcang, there will be someone else. That bug's meaning isn't just that. Yu Yin frowned. Don't worry, Master. Zhu Yao patted on her chest and guaranteed. I have already thought of a perfect solution. It's definitely safe, environmentally friendly, and very effective. Yu Yin lowered his head to look at her, signaling her to continue. Zhu Yao chuckled. It's very simple. The reason why Yi Qingcang is a bug is because he has set a wrong example for the people of the world. Everyone learns from him, and the more they learn, the worse they become. In the end, they lead the world to destruction. If we want to solve this problem once and for all, then wouldn't it be enough if we set a better example for the people of the world? Better cultivation, better luck, more reputation, more mainstream than him. It's best if we can directly ascend. With such a precious gem in front of us, no matter how heaven-defying he is, the people of the world will naturally not learn from him. Yu Yin pondered for a moment before nodding. This was indeed a solution. He looked at his disciple's excited look. You plan to be a new example? With his disciple's heaven-defying luck, it was indeed very easy to achieve. I can't. Zhu Yao shook her head. Role models, they must be down to earth. The reason why so many people are wary of Yi Qingcang is because he was originally a Pinta spirit veins holder, and he started off as an outer sect disciple. He climbed to the peak step by step. Only a counterattack from such a difficult starting point would be able to resonate with everyone. Others would think that if he, a Pinta spirit veins holder, could do it, then they would be able to do it as well. If they want to set a new role model, their starting point must at least be a Pinta spirit veins holder like him. It would be best if they were worse than him. Although I'm a Pinta spirit veins holder, everyone knows that I'm currently the successor of Skybound Peak. Yu Yan's expression turned cold. He corrected. You're the successor of my Jade Forest Peak. Master, is there a need to fuss over such small details with me? I'm saying that if my starting point is too high, everyone will feel that I'm not down to earth. Also, I'm a dandelion spirit. We're not even of the same race, so we won't resonate with each other. In the eyes of others, I'm at most a Ms. Perfect. Why did he feel a little pleased when he thought this way? The current me won't do. So, that's why I need to find a grassroots young man with the right values to help him up. Furthermore, there was also the successful case of Little Radish. It shouldn't be too difficult to teach another positive young man, right? Besides, there was still his master. Yu Yin frowned even deeper. When he thought about how his disciple would always have an eyesore by her side in the future, he felt extremely unhappy. Sure enough, when I was in my disciple's world, I should have dismantled the heavenly book. That way, my disciple wouldn't have to worry about these things. Do you have a candidate in mind? Zhu Yao's expression instantly collapsed. I don't. If she did, she wouldn't be so conflicted. She had always felt that radishes should be planted from a young age. With so many disciples in the sect, he would definitely be able to find a suitable one. He really couldn't. Then he went down the mountain. The world was so big, there had to be a radish that was suitable for planting. And months later, little friend, how old are you? How about I test your spirit root? Does he have a master? Are you willing to leave with Auntie? Zhu Yao kindly looked at the little child who was still nibbling on the tonghulu. The little radish was stunned, and the tonghulu in his hand trembled. Tears began to accumulate in her big watery eyes, and she let out a cry. His cries were world-shaking. Mother, there's a weird ant here. Zhu Yao stiffened and began to hurriedly console him. Hey, why are you crying? I didn't hit you. Wah, Mother. Strange auntie wants to hit me. When did I hit you? Don't cry. Wah, Mom, she's still angry at me. Wah, who is bullying my Urga? A peasant woman rushed out with a hoe in her hand. Zhu Yao simply felt her heart skip a beat, and she immediately ran. After running for a few miles, he finally got rid of the cruel peasant woman. She took a few long breaths while still in shock. Master, humans are so scary. I want to go back and be a quiet dandelion. Ever since she decided to groom a good role model, Zhu Yao began to bitterly search for a target to groom. Initially, she had planned to just pick one from the outer sect of Nesh Chezare's sect, as there had to be one with the right values. In the end, after walking one round, she found out that the sect would choose a disciple once every 10 years. The last time was 5 years ago, and the little radish from back then had already matured into a big radish. The next batch of radishes would only be stocked 5 years later. Left with no choice, she could only descend the mountain and head to the villages of mortals around Nesh Chezare sect to try her luck. She had initially thought that it would be easy. After all, though these mortals were not practitioners, they had been influenced by the deity sects for many years and were clear about the matters of deity cultivation. They were unlike those mortals who were completely unaware of the existence of practitioners. However, her full confidence was slapped in the face by reality. Big sis, I can see that your son's bones are exquisite, and he's a good material for deity cultivation. Why don't you follow me and step onto the great Tao? This is my daughter. This big brother, I can see that the child in your family is smart and quick-witted. His eyes are filled with spirit, so his comprehension ability must be extremely good. Why don't you follow me and cultivate? He's an idiot. Great Lord, this grandson of yours is already so sensible at such a young age. It seems like he's someone with great luck. Why don't you enter my sect and cultivate? This is my son. He's 30 this year. This granny, does this child in your family have spirit veins? I'm the ancestral Grand Master of Nesh Chezare sect, and I'm here to take in a disciple. You're crazy. This big sister-in-law, does your family have a child around 10 years old? Why don't I help him test his spirit veins? Everyone, hurry and come out. That swindler is here again. That Andy. Beat this human trafficker to death. In half a month's time, she had visited all of the surrounding villages. Putting aside the fact that she did not have a single disciple, she was even treated as a human trafficker that everyone had to be wary of. No matter which villager saw her, they would not say a word. Raising the brick and the cleaver, they would chase after her. Yet, she could not make a move against mortals. Just thinking about it made her sullen. A mighty Azoth core, no, a demigod practitioner, personally came to take in a disciple. How could it be easy for her? In the end, everyone treated her as a pervert. These mortals who did not know what was good for them. I already said you're ugly. Look, you scared the little kid, didn't you? Little Eighth, who was lying on her head, said sarcastically with a gloating look. Zhu Yao was instantly enraged, and she immediately pulled him down. If you can do it, then go. Fine, I'll go. Little Eighth's bird face was stiff as he jumped down from her head. Even though he was clearly unable to fly, he still flapped his little wings, heading towards a house in front of him. That was a farmer's family. The yard was surrounded by a fence that was only as tall as his waist. Little Eighth lightly coughed, and then, facing the child who was playing with mud in the yard, he said with an especially arrogant tone, Mortal, I am a phoenix of the god race, and I have the intention of taking you in as bird. Before he could finish, the child's eyes instantly shone. He looked at little Eighth with an excited look. Little Eighth was a little unhappy. I'm a phoenix. Don't speak as though I'm one of those low-level winged clansmen. I'm bird. There's a bird. Little Wimp raised his hands that were covered in mud and ran over with an excited look. Pouncing forward, he grabbed onto Little Eighth's wings and conveniently covered him in mud. Little Eighth was instantly dumbfounded and began to struggle. Ah, let go of me, you foolish mortal. Ah, my feather. Don't pluck my feather. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched, and she sighed. She had no choice but to rescue a certain foolish phoenix that was about to be played to death by the spoiled brat. Little friend, it's wrong to bully little animals. Bird. The child was a little unwilling to see the little bird in his hands being snatched away. Reaching out his little claws, he wanted to snatch it back. The moment he raised his head, he was stunned for a moment. Staring at her hair, he blurted out, Nest. You're the nest. Your entire family is a nest. Nest. Pluck the nest. The child excitedly reached out to her hair. What are you doing? Hey. Don't pull my hair, hey. Let go. Aya. It hurts. It hurts. I'm going to do it. I'm really going to do it. Aya. 10 minutes later, the two people who had finally escaped. Seventh elder sister. Emin, mortals are so scary. Emin, 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 Emin. He furiously nodded his head. Little 8. My feather Zhu Yao, my hair. Zhu Yao, who had been crippled before she had even one, decided to temporarily postpone the matter of adopting Little Radish. Dragging her exhausted body, she returned to Nest Chazeray's sect. Her heart was so tired. She felt as though she never wanted to see a devilish child again in her entire life. I heard that Penta Spirit Vane's foundation disciple of Talisman's spiritual mountain. The disciple that Reverend Chu Chu took in 5 years ago? That's right. It's only been 5 years. Even someone with dual spirit veins isn't that fast. So what if he built his foundation? He's just a Penta Spirit Veins holder. He'll stop at foundation for his entire life. That might not be the case. I heard that Reverend Chu Chu views him with great importance. Who in the sect doesn't know of Reverend Chu Chu's personality? Most probably, it's just a passing interest. He's only able to enter the inner sect because he's lucky. That's true. However, I heard that Senior Marshal Brother Bai has gone into closed-door training to build his foundation as well. Inner sect disciples sure have good lives. The voices of the two disciples gradually grew further and further away, yet not a single word of their conversation was missed. Zhu Yao's footsteps paused, and she was stunned. Yi Qingsong had built his foundation? The last time she saw him, he was still at the 8th level of essence. How many months had it been? Wasn't it a little too fast? It was 5 years faster than the scenario. And little Bai, he had actually gone into closed-door training to build his foundation as well. She had thought that the reason why she had not seen him for so many days was because Chewie had told him clearly that he was in a bad mood after being heartbroken and didn't want to go out. However, with his current mental state, was it really good for him to build his foundation? Why did she have a bad premonition? Granny, you're back. The moment she returned to Skybound Peak, she saw Yi Qingsong waiting at the entrance, and he was currently greeting her with a brilliant smile. Yo, student Little Song. Zhu Yao replied with a smile and waved at him. After carefully inspecting him for a moment, she realized that he had indeed built his foundation successfully, and the spiritual energy in his body had thickened by quite a bit as well. Congratulations on building your foundation. He scratched his head a little embarrassedly. It's all thanks to Granny's words back then, allowing Qingsong to see the light and find his true self. That's why I was able to build my foundation so quickly. What did I say this time? Why didn't she know about it, hey? Don't scare me, dear. If you say it like that, it will make me feel as though I was the one who raised the bug, all right? Yi Qingsong smiled, as though he did not want to explain too much. However, the gaze he was looking at her with contained a hint of childish admiration. Scratching his head, he said a little embarrassedly. Granny, I wonder if this disciple can come and talk to you often? Can I reject him? I'm very busy. It's fine. Then I'll come again when Granny isn't busy? Hey, what's with the tone you're using to pester me? Both of his eyes were glowing. I feel that Granny knows a lot of very important things. Chingsong wishes to become someone like Granny as well. Someone like her? Then you have to make a trip to Thailand first. Cuckoo, did you come looking for me just to thank me? He was startled for a moment, and then, as though he had just recalled the proper business, he took out a red bottle from the storage pouch next to him and passed it to her. Granny, this pellet is something I recently refined. Although it's not that rare, it's still a token of my appreciation. What's this? As someone who had never taken medicine before, he expressed that he did not recognize it. Barrier-breaking pellet. Zhu Yao was startled as she looked at his calm expression. Barrier-breaking pellet. A third-rank pellet. He had only started refining pellets for a few days, and he was already able to refine a third-rank pellet so quickly. Not bad, little fellow. You have a bright future ahead of you. He smiled a little embarrassedly. If Granny likes it, I will refine even more pellets for you in the future. You don't have to be so courteous. Actually, Zhu Yao had just received the pellet, and just as she was about to take a closer look, she suddenly felt a chill in her chest, as though she was stuck in a piece of ice. It was a chill that penetrated her heart, and her heart soared. It was so cold that she was bending over. Granny, what's wrong? I'm fine. Zhu Yao immediately straightened her back. Master, what are you doing? Why did you suddenly turn pee-pee so cold? Ho ho ho. Thank you for your pellet. Hot, 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 hot. Why did it suddenly turn hot again? Granny, is she really fine? I'm fine. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth and held on, as she revealed a slightly twisted smile. Ho ho ho. I suddenly recalled that the gas in the house was not turned off. I'm going back first, goodbye. She then rushed into the hall, leaving behind a confused Yi Qingcong. What's gas? The moment Zhu Yao entered the house, she immediately took out pee-pee from her bosom. The pee was still emitting heat, as though it was a freshly baked potato. Master, I didn't plan on taking any pellets. Zhu Yao explained as she felt like crying. Just how much did her master hate pellets? The pea flashed with a white light, and its temperature finally dropped. A person dressed in a snow-white robe, yet with an ice-cold expression, appeared in front of her. Her face was filled with, I'm unhappy. She raised one of her hands and made an oath. I have never taken a single pellet behind your back, I swear it. Chapter 297. A certain Shifu frowned, turned to look at her raised hand, and then stared at it. Zhu Yao raised her head and looked at the item in her hands. Fuck. He raised his hand and threw the bottle away. Really, really. Only then did his expression soften quite a bit. Sigh. Having a master who was irreconcilable with medicinal pills was really tiring. Zhu Yao heaved a sigh of relief, however. Yu Yan suddenly took a step forward and pulled her into his embrace. Before she could react, a shadow appeared in front of her. Her lips were pressed heavily, and a familiar scent filled her nose. Why did I suddenly get lucky? Moss. Just as she opened her mouth, a certain someone had already barged in with familiarity and tenderness. It had to be said that although a certain someone was not very enlightened in this aspect, his learning ability was quite strong. Although he didn't know why his master was acting so strangely, since he couldn't resist, he might as well enjoy it. Let the welfare come more fiercely. 80, who had been watching from the top of its head. Shouldn't he retreat a little? Zhu Yao felt a little out of sorts for the entire day, as though something was going to happen. Even the abduction. Apui. Even the task of looking for Little Radish was a little difficult for him to concentrate on. It wasn't until he sensed the unusual movement of the spiritual energy in the sect that his sixth sense was confirmed. The spiritual energy fluctuation over there was not very obvious. If not for her powerful divine sense, she would not have sensed it. What she was truly worried about was Little Tyrant's spiritual energy fluctuation. She simply felt her heart tremble. Turning around, she flew back to Nest Chaseree's sect. When she rushed to Little Tyrant's cave residence, there were already 7 to 8 people gathered there. Sect Master Chu Jiang, 3 nascent soul elders, and even revered Wu Fu were among them. Sigh. What a pity. From afar, they could hear Chu Jiang sigh. Zhu Yao immediately squeezed in. What's wrong with Little Bai? Little White was sitting in the middle with a pale face. The spirit chi on its body was quite chaotic, and it seemed to be dissipating. An elder was sitting behind him, healing him. Greetings, Martial Aunt. Chu Jiang and the few elders bowed to her in unison. What happened? Zhu Yao looked towards Chu Jiang. His expression changed, and he said with a look of pity, Ziyuan failed to reach Foundation establishment. Fortunately, he discovered it in time. It won't damage the Foundation. Failure. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment and was a little doubtful. Little Bai's aptitude isn't bad. Why did it fail? This disciple does not know. Chu Jiang also had the same question. Logically speaking, this child's foundation had always been very good. Even going into seclusion to build his foundation was his suggestion, but he still failed. But it was all right. It was just foundation establishment, even if it was a failure. With him watching over them, they would at most drop 2 levels of cultivation, and they would just have to cultivate again. Puff! Suddenly, the little tyrant puked out a mouthful of blood. The chaotic spiritual energy earlier had completely dispersed in an instant. His face turned even paler. His cultivation had even directly fallen from the great circle of chi condensation back to the 3rd level of chi condensation. Little Bai. Zhu Yao took a step forward and held on to Little Tyrant who was about to fall. She casually placed her fingers on his pulse. Fortunately, he was fine. Although his meridians were damaged, his dantian was still intact. Grandma. Little Tyrant raised his head and glanced at her. His expression was a little confused. Just as Zhu Yao was about to console him, the elders sitting at the back stood up with a shocked look. How is this possible? Junior Martial Brother Chu Ying, just what happened? Chu Jiang frowned. Logically speaking, as a nascent soul practitioner, suppressing the chaotic spiritual energy of a foundation practitioner should be an easy task. How could he have failed? Elder Chu Ying's face instantly revealed a huge fury. He pointed at Little Bai and said, He's not a disciple with dual spirit veins. When these words came out, everyone looked at him strangely. Junior Martial Brother, what do you mean by that? Chu Jiang had a faint guess, yet he still asked, unwilling to give up. Chu Ying coldly snorted, as though he had been greatly fooled. He glared at Little Bai who was on the ground while trembling from anger. Earlier, after I helped him clear his spiritual energy, I realized that there was a small amount of other spiritual energy mixed in his body, which was not as pure as the dual spirit veins. Suspicious, I checked his spirit veins, only to realize that there were 3 more spirit veins sealed in his body. They were only revealed because he failed to build his foundation this time. 3. Then doesn't that mean he's 5 elemental cripple spirit veins? That's impossible. Little Tyrant had a look of disbelief as well. Ignoring his heavily injured body, he refuted. I clearly have the metal and fire dual spirit veins. How did I end up with the pinna spirit veins? I'm going to have to ask you that. Chu Ying's anger grew even greater. You clearly have the 5 elemental cripple spirit veins, yet you're pretending to have dual spirit veins. What's the meaning of this? Little Tyrant explained even more anxiously. Pretending? No, I'm not. Unfortunately, no one present believed him. Even a fool would know the difference between a dual spirit vein and a pinna spirit vein. The sect would spend a large amount of resources to nurture a dual spirit vein disciple, but they would not nurture a pinna spirit vein disciple. In an instant, everyone looked at Bai Ziyuan with either disappointed or furious expressions. Zhu Yao pressed down on Little Bai who was moving around and said, Can I ask something? Just what kind of situation is needed to conceal one's spirit veins, to the point where even the spirit testing stones are unable to detect it? Chu Ying replied, Sealing your spirit veins before guiding spiritual energy into your body, or reaching the Azoth core realm. Halfway through his words, he paused. Only then did everyone realize that something was amiss. Bai Ziyuan was just an essence practitioner, so it was naturally impossible for him to conceal his spirit veins. There was another method, which was to seal one's spirit veins before even cultivating. Bai Ziyuan grew up in the sect and had his spirit veins tested before he was 3 years old. No matter how much of a genius a child was, it was impossible for him to be so scheming before he was 3 years old, right? So what if he didn't do it himself? Chewing still refused to budge. He was a dual spirit veins holder of metal and fire as well, which was why he was suppressing the chaotic spiritual energy in Little Bai, who possessed the same spirit veins as him earlier, who knew that the moment he made a move, he would realize that the other party possessed pentaspirit veins. Adding that he was not mentally prepared, his own cultivation would be damaged if he was careless. This was also the reason why he was so furious. He felt that he had been fooled. Even if he wasn't the one who sealed his spirit veins, he must have a huge connection with it. I don't believe that he was completely unaware of this beforehand. A disciple with such wild ambitions definitely cannot be underestimated. Senior Martial Uncle. Little Bai's face was pale to the point where not a single bit of blood could be seen. His eyes were filled with the pain of having suffered a huge blow, yet he still tried his best to explain to the crowd. He turned to look at Chu Jiang. Sect Master, believe me, this disciple definitely has no intentions of hiding anything. I really didn't know that I possessed pentaspirit veins. Ziyuan. Chu Jiang believed him. After all, he was the one who watched this child grow up. Senior Martial Brother Sect Master. Chewing continued. This cannot be allowed to continue. Otherwise, where would the prestige of our Nes Chazari sect be? How would the various sects view us? Just think about it. If everyone was like him, then how would our Nes Chazari sect stand in the cultivation world from now on? This time, because he only cultivated 2 types of spiritual energy, he created the illusion of an essence paragon and forcefully built his foundation, which was why he was discovered. If it was someone else who cultivated all 5 types of spiritual energy, who would be able to sense it? Wouldn't it be a waste of the sect's resources? No matter if he knew beforehand or not, we can't just let this go. Little Bai's figure was slightly trembling. He clenched his fists by his side, and after a while, he said with a bitter expression, Senior Martial Uncle, don't worry. This disciple requests to withdraw from the inner sect. Humph. Chewing coldly snorted and turned his head. Chu Jiang had a troubled look as well. Chewing was right. Concealing spirit veins was usually a huge taboo in the various sects in the cultivation world. As the sect master, he had a responsibility on him, and he could not pretend that he did not see it. Sighing, he took a step forward. And said, Zun, pack up and leave the main peak later. Then, become my disciple. Go to Skybound Peak. Zhu Yao continued. The crowd turned their heads one after another and looked at her as though she was an idiot. Chu Ying's reaction was even more intense. How could this still be considered a punishment? He's just a Penta Spirit Veins disciple. How can he have the qualifications to enter Skybound Peak? But I'm a Penta Spirit Veins disciple as well. Zhu Yao innocently pointed at her nose. Before despising others, first consider the person who was implicated, all right? This? Chu Ying was completely blocked, and his face was flushed red from anger. Little Bai turned his head as well, and the rims of his eyes instantly reddened. Grandma, be good. Zhu Yao stroked his head. Grandma will protect you. Little martial aunt, how can you mess around like this? Chewing angrily blew his beard, yet he did not dare to quarrel with her face to face. Looking around, he looked towards the only demigod sovereign at the side with pleading eyes. Senior Martial Aunt Wu Fu, what do you think about this matter? Wu Fu frowned as well, as he was a little disapproving of Zhu Yao's clearly protective actions. Sighing, he spoke up. Junior Martial Sister Zhu, the matter of accepting him into Skybound Peak is indeed inappropriate. Skybound Peak was left behind by me, ancestor Su Yao, for the sake of benefiting my descendants. And this child, based on this matter, even if we kill him now, it would not be too much. Accepting him into Skybound Peak, not only is it not a punishment, it's a reward. I don't think so. Zhu Yao patted on Little Bai's head and then looked towards Wu Fu. You must punish him for his mistakes. The prerequisite is that he made a mistake. However, regarding the matter of his spirit veins being sealed, he basically did not know about it. Otherwise, no matter how stupid he was, he would not have only guided in 2 types of spiritual energy after so many years, and even built his foundation to his death. As the saying goes, the ignorant are innocent. Even if he was in the wrong, it was only because he did not realize that there was a problem with his spirit veins in time. If that's the case, as his teachers, all of you have more experience than him, and know more than him as well. Since even all of you did not realize it, what right do you have to blame him? If he's in the wrong, all of you are in the wrong as well. The crowd exchanged glances, and a hint of guilt even flashed past Chu Jiang's face. Furthermore, Zhu Yao continued, you said that he doesn't deserve to enter Skybound Peak because of his Pinna spirit veins. I wish to ask Sovereign Wu Fu and the various elders if my memory is bad. In Nes Chazerei sect's rules, are there any explicit rules regarding the spirit veins that a disciple can enter into? Crowd. This time, even Wu Fu was speechless. Indeed, though the various sects had always placed great importance on spirit veins, there were truly no such rules. For a moment, everyone began to hesitate. Though, Chu Ying at the side grew anxious. He had a fiery temper in the first place, and he could not stand being deceived the most. Furthermore, he had a stubborn personality, so he did not care about his status either. He immediately charged over and said, you're simply twisting words and forcing logic. No matter what, in my opinion, the mistake this Bai Ziyuan committed is basically irredeemable. He must be expelled from Nes Chazerei sect. I definitely will not allow the resources of Skybound Peak to land on someone like him. When his words fell, the others seemed to have come to a realization as well, as they began to hesitate one after another. Zhu Yao's expression instantly turned cold. In the end, they were still unwilling to part with the resources of Skybound Peak. They were afraid that she would privately use them on Little Tyrant, right? Sect Master, what do you think? Chu Jiang had a conflicted look as well.
Grandma.
Little Tyrant tugged on the corner of her robe and shook his head with a despairing look. Forget it. Turning around, he heavily bowed towards Chu Jiang. Thank you, Sect Master, for your many years of guidance. This disciple, Ziyuan, will leave Nes Chazerei sect now. As he said that, he heavily kowtowed 3 times and struggled to stand up. Wait a minute. Zhu Yao's heart ached as she pulled him back. If we're leaving, then let's leave together. He fiercely widened his eyes. Grandma, I have already said that I will take you in as my disciple, so naturally, I will keep to my word. Since you're actually my disciple, then I am responsible for your mistakes as well. Why don't we be chased out together? Little martial ant. This time, even Chu Jiang was anxious as he reached out his hand to stop her. How can you leave? Junior martial sister Zhu, you mustn't be rash. Wu Fu advised as well. If you leave, what will happen to Skybound Peak? Chu Ying blurted out. All right, as expected, she was just a guard. Zhu Yao sighed. She looked at the crowd and said, what if I say that the formation in Skybound Peak has already been dispelled? Even if it's dispelled, you won't. What? Chu Jiang fiercely widened his eyes. His face was filled with disbelief. Why you? You're saying that Skybound Peak is currently... It can enter and leave as it pleases. The entire place was silent for 2 seconds. Everyone's eyes shone with an excited light, and there were even people who could not wait to turn their heads in the direction of Skybound Peak. Since the formation had been dispelled, that meant that the treasures in Skybound Peak could be taken out anytime. They were left behind by the Ascended Ancestor, so who knew how many of them there were? Senior Martial Ant, the formation in Skybound Peak has really been dispelled? How did you dispel it? Chu Ying took a step forward and once again confirmed, when I was organizing the mystic arts inside, I saw the description regarding the formation. Initially, I wanted to give it a try, but I never expected that it would really be dispelled. The reason why I came here today is to tell you all about this. Zhu Yao glanced at the crowd who could hardly conceal their excitement, and casually made up a story. Since the formation has been dispelled, then I will return Skybond Peak to you all. This way, there shouldn't be a problem for me to leave Nest Chazerae sect, right? Grandma. Little Bai, however, grew anxious, as if he wanted to say something. Zhu Yao shook her head, signaling him not to speak. How could Chu Ying be bothered to refute her? Her entire mind was filled with thoughts of what was inside. Though, Chu Jiang regained his composure a little and took a step forward. Since little martial ant is able to dispel the formation, it proves that you are fated with Skybond Peak. Why mention about returning it? Senior martial brother, those words aren't right. Before Zhu Yao could even speak, she was interrupted by another elder at the side. Skybond Peak was left behind by the ancestor in our sect in the first place, and not an individual's. Back then, it was announced that whoever was able to dispel the riddle would be able to obtain Skybond Peak, and that was a conclusion made by the later generations. Senior Marshal Aunt Zhu may have done a meritorious deed in dispelling the formation, but she had only done what she should have done. Furthermore, with her Penta-Spirit Veins aptitude, being able to form her Azoth core within 5 years can already be considered as a heavenly opportunity. The meaning behind his words was that she had occupied Skybond Peak for 5 years and had even reached the Azoth core stage. This could already be considered as having treated her quite well. Returning it now was only right. Chapter 298. Junior Brother. Chu Jiang was a little annoyed. Wasn't this killing the donkey when it was no longer of use? Martial Nephew Sect Master Paragon Wu Fu suddenly spoke up as well. Now that the formation has been dispelled, it will definitely be coveted by many parties. Junior Martial Sister Zhu is only at the Azoth core stage. It would be even more inappropriate for her to remain in Skybond Peak. Chu Jiang was stunned. He swallowed the retort that was about to come out of his mouth. Indeed, the formation had been dispelled. Then the excuse that only Martial Uncle could enter the hall was useless. Once the news got out, it would definitely be the envy of all the sects and clans. At that time, no one could say for sure what would happen. Even if he had the heart, he could not allow Zhu Yao to continue bearing the title of Skybond Peak Master. Turning his head, he glanced at Zhu Yao, who still had a calm look on her face. Instantly, his heart was filled with guilt. In the beginning, recognizing her as his martial uncle was mostly just a temporary measure. The people in the sect, including himself, did not want to admit it. But after all these years, he really liked this junior martial uncle. All these years, regardless of whether it was within the sect or outside, she had truly fulfilled her duty as a martial uncle. Moreover, she had done it even better. She had never made a single request of him, but when it came to anything he suggested, she would accept it all. He even had a feeling that she was born for this identity. For a moment, Chu Jiang was extremely conflicted, while the others began to excitedly discuss the matters regarding Skybond Peak, and even requested Zhu Yao to bring them there to take a look. While they were discussing, Zhu Yao had already treated Little Tyrant's injuries. Hearing such a request, she did not reject it. Bringing a group of people, she majestically returned. Everyone's faces were filled with unconcealable excitement, and their footsteps were about to fly. Zhu Yao suddenly had the misconception that she was leading the naughty kids out to set off firecrackers during Chinese New Year. But when they reached the door, they were stunned again. Martial Uncle Zhu. This formation. The formation was clearly on the door. How could it be undone? Damn. How could I forget about the formation that Master set up? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched, and she immediately sent a voice transmission to PP, who was in her embrace. Master, how do we dispel this formation? 5 elemental profound thunder formation. His master's cold voice resounded in his mind. Immediately, an image appeared in his mind, including the spell to dispel the formation, the deduced formation, as well as the specific method of setting up the formation, etc. Zhu Yao looked at it carefully and immediately understood it. Such a teaching method. It was simply awesome. This is a new formation that was added later on. However, at the very center, there was a square-shaped hole that was missing, which was especially eye-catching. He then recalled what Senior Marshal Aunt Zhu said. Nothing was touched inside, and only a brick was dug out. It seemed to be true now. But why did he feel as though he had lost a watermelon after picking up a sesame seed? This feeling of suffocation reached its peak when he came out and could no longer see Zhu Yao and Bai Ziyuan. However, his attention was immediately stolen by the pile of miscellaneous matters that came next. Nest Chazerei sect had truly obtained Skybond Peak. With so many good items, they naturally had to use them. However, who should they use them for, and how should they use them? It became a difficult problem once again. No matter how they divided them, there would always be people with opinions. As the head of a great clan, Chu Jiang felt his head swelling. Putting aside the internal conflicts, there had to be external reasons as well. With so many items being divided, there would definitely be some clues. It wasn't like the various sects were blind. In an instant, the number of people coveting Skybond Peak had increased. This way, they did not dare to spread the news of Zhu Yao's departure. They did not pursue the matter of Little Bai too much either, adding that Chu Jiang had purposely gone easy on her. Other than the matters regarding the higher-ups that day, the matter of Little Bai's spirit veins was not spread out. However, the sect was lacking a disciple and a senior martial aunt in name. Their days were not much different from before. However, there was no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. It was still fine in the beginning, but after a long time, there would definitely be loopholes. There would often be various people who came to investigate, and there were also other sects who came to visit under various pretexts. Nest Chazerei sect could not guard against them all. This way, it would have been better if they had not obtained Skybond Peak. Of course, Zhu Yao, who had already descended the mountain, was completely unaware of these things. She was currently nimbly stepping on her flying sword. A pea on her left hand, a bird on her right, and a fat child following behind her. Apui, a youth. Initially, she had wanted to return to Tranquil Valley. However, seeing how heavily injured Little Tyrant was, she had no choice but to find a town to settle down and treat it as a sightseeing trip. She had yet to arrive at the nearest practitioner market. Her new follower, Little Tyrant classmate. He was about to vomit blood. She had no choice but to stop, as she planned to heal his injuries. Though his injuries were easy to heal, the spirit veins sealed in his body were difficult to deal with. It seemed to be a special formation that could not be detected by others. It seemed to be a special formation that was impossible to detect. If it wasn't dispelled in time, one would suffer a backlash. If it was heavy, his spirit veins would be destroyed. Though Zhu Yao was very confident in her own formation techniques, she could not help but hesitate. Hence, she decided to seek help from the spectators outside. Her master in the P. Yu Yin came out. He did not say that he would help, nor did he say that he would not help. He simply looked coldly at Little Tyrant, who was vomiting blood on the ground. The cold aura on his body was about to freeze. 2 words were written on his face. Displeased. It was one thing for him to heal his half-dead disciple every time. But who was this brat? Why did he have to do it? As expected, the disciple's disciple, or whatever, was really annoying. Little Tyrant trembled from his stare. In an instant, he felt as though the surrounding temperature had dropped by quite a bit, and the chilly wind was about to freeze him. Who was this person? He was so scary. Grandma! He could not help but call out to Zhu Yao. He was so frightened that he had even forgotten to vomit blood. This senior is... Only then did Zhu Yao recall that he had never seen her master before. Thinking that she would be bringing him along in the future, she did not hide it from him. This is my master. Mas. No wonder it's Wang Shang. He naturally thought of Skybond Peak. Of course not. Zhu Yao shook her head. This is the master I had before I went to Nest Chazerei sect. My only master. Little Tyrant still had a confused look. Wasn't Grandma a dandelion spirit? She had a master. Could he be an even older dandelion? All right, Little Tyrant. Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders. In the future, we're on the same boat. Let me introduce him to you. This is my little brother. She plucked out the stupid bird that was still laying on her head as a headdress. Little Bai. Forget about her master? Then how did her little brother return? This was clearly a bird. Were dandelions and birds related by blood? The world of spirits was so hard to understand. He's called Feng Ba. You can just call him Little Ba. Zhu Yao continued to introduce. As for my master, you can call him Grandpa. Ah, shouldn't he be called Grandmaster? The hell was Grandpa? Were the generations of spirits all this messy? Little Tyrant still had a confused look, while Yu Yin was instantly healed by the word Grandpa. Grandma and Grandpa. The moment he heard it, he knew they were a pair of master and disciple. Amen. He liked it. In an instant, he was no longer that averse towards unsealing, and his expression turned a little better. Casting an art with one hand, he waved his hand, and a ray of white light entered Little Tyrant's forehead. Done. Ah. Little Bai hurriedly sensed for a moment, and realized that the obstructed spiritual energy in his body had indeed been cleared. There were now 3 more unfamiliar spiritual energy sources, and they were completely empty. As expected, they were unsealed. Wasn't this a little too fast? Even nascent soul practitioners did not dare to easily unseal it, yet with just a wave of his hand. Were all old dandelions this incredible? Just as Little Bai was about to express his admiration, that newly appointed grandpa raised his head and looked at the sky. It's late, sleep. Indeed, the sky had already darkened, and the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. However, this place was still quite a distance away from the market. It seemed like they had to sleep outdoors today. Yee! With a wave of Yu Yan's hand, the empty ground in front of them began to rumble. Not even a moment later, a straw cottage began to automatically build itself. Little Bai fiercely widened his eyes. He was actually able to build a house using earth-type and wood-type mystic arts in an instant. This grandpa's strength was unfathomable. It seemed like he did not have to sleep in the wilderness today. Little Bai was excited, only to see that powerful grandpa turn around and pull his grandma into the house. Then, with a bang, he closed the door. The injured Little Bai. This was different from what he had imagined. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a fiery red object was thrown out. He caught it with his hands, and a fiery red little bird appeared in his hands. It was Little Eighth. A man and a bird stared at each other. Little Bai, what happened to the promised master-disciple relationship? Little Eighth, what happened to the promised brother-sister relationship? Zhu Yao glanced at her master, who had pressed her onto the bed the moment he entered the house, yet did not do anything reckless. Even after returning to the P, he did not forget to cover her with the blanket. Zhu Yao, what happened to the promised pair? The moon was as cold as water. Bai Ziyuan adjusted his internal breathing. There had never been a moment where the spiritual energy in his body was so lacking, and a piercing pain instantly flashed across the depths of his heart. He had grown up in Nes Chazere's sect since young, and had always been working hard to become a good disciple that could make his master proud. When he was young, he did not understand what life and death isolation meant, and thought that his master did not like him, which was why he did not come out to see him. Hence, he worked even harder than his fellow martial brothers to raise his cultivation, and wanted to build his foundation as soon as possible. Who knew that in just a few short days, he would lose his master, lose his cultivation, and even be expelled from the sect. And he even implicated his grandma. Hey, I'm warning you, don't touch my feathers. A tender voice suddenly sounded from his side. If you dare to pluck one, I will roast you. Little Bai was startled, as he looked at the little fiery red bird at the side in shock. You can speak? So what if I can speak? Little Eighth rolled his eyes. I'm even proficient in the various languages of demonic beasts, demons, and gods. Chapter 299. I really don't understand you human practitioners. Little Eighth shook his bird head. Is longevity really that important? For this goal, you can do anything. Since birth, you've been fighting for your aptitude and luck. All of you desperately want to ascend and attain the Tao. He suddenly recalled Cheng Qingdiao. For the sake of longevity, he dared to kill a god. But isn't the goal of a practitioner to attain the Tao and become a deity? Little Bai sighed. I've entered a deity sect since I was young. Other than cultivating, what else can I do? Up to you. Little Eighth's mood instantly turned bad. In any case, my seventh elder sister wants to help you, so I can only follow her wishes. However, if there comes a day when you dare to harm her. His voice turned cold, and he said word by word, I will definitely destroy your soul. He said it with too much certainty, and even Little Bai could not help but tremble, as though he could really do it. He could not help but feel a little doubtful. He rubbed his hand that was in pain. Just what kind of beast are you? Beast, your sister. Little Eighth immediately followed up with another claw. You foolish human. I'm a phoenix. Do you know the god race? Don't lump me together with those low-level beasts. Phoenix. Phoenixes look like this? Little Bai evidently did not believe him. Was there a phoenix that was this round? And its body was covered in fur. This was evidently a little bird that had just hatched. Little Eighth did not have the slightest self-awareness and intentionally shook his wings. How is it? Are you shocked by my race's elegance? How can the mortal beasts of this world be as? Little Bai did not speak. He immediately materialized a water mirror in front of him and reflected a fiery red ball. Little Eighth, what's that stupid bird? He turned to look at Little Bai, only to see an identical red ball reflected in his eyes. A scream instantly pierced through the sky. Little Bai, had he never looked at himself in a mirror before? Zhu felt a little strange the moment she woke up. Little Eighth's entire bird body was listless, and he would occasionally glance at his own wings, revealing an expression as though he had nothing left to live for. Little Bai was the same as well. The word decadent was written all over his face. Zhu looked left and right, and automatically began to imagine the 108 unspeakable things the two of them did last night. Just what happened between the two of them last night? Don't mess around while I'm not here. Grandma. Little Tyrant took a step forward and straightened his expression. My injuries have already healed. Now, should I leave? He could not help but turn around to look in the direction of Enchanting sect. His eyes were filled with complicated emotions. There were worries, sadness, resentment, and bewilderment. Zhu frowned and patted on his shoulders. What's wrong? Can't bear to? His eyes darkened. After a while, he said, I grew up there. Now that I'm this talented, I probably can't cultivate anymore. His head sank lower and lower. He clenched his fists subconsciously, and his body began to tremble slightly. Zhu frowned. Grandma. He suddenly raised his head. She asked anxiously, Why doesn't anyone believe me? Even Sect Master. I really didn't hide my spirit root on purpose. If I had known that If I had known that you were a Penta spirit root, what would you have done? Little Tyrant was stunned. A hint of panic flashed across his eyes, but he couldn't find the words to reply. Zhu sighed, and then turned to look at Enchanting sect. Little Tyrant, do you resent them? He did not speak. However, his hands instantly sank into his palms. You resent them, right? Resent them for wrongly accusing you. Resent the sect master who watched you grow up not understanding you. And resent them for turning against you the moment they discovered your spirit root, chasing you out of Enchanting sect? Zhu looked straight into his eyes. You resent them for using this to make me hand over Skybound Peak, and resent yourself for being a Penta spirit root even more, right? Is that wrong? Little Bai instantly grew agitated. Grandma, I don't know what I did wrong. Is being a Penta spirit root really such a heinous crime? Huh. Zhu stroked his head and seriously looked into his eyes. Suddenly, she felt a little glad that she came out with this child. Otherwise, with his experiences of ups and downs, without anyone guiding him by the side, he would only become more and more extreme. In the end, if he wasn't crippled, he would turn into a new bug that would take revenge on society. Little Bai, Grandma can't say if it's right or wrong for you to resent them, but I simply want to say that in this world, no one has an absolute obligation to always treat you well. Though betrayal is very shameless, it's still built on the foundation that you have already put in. Say, if only you knew that you were a Penta spirit root right from the start. But if you knew from the start, Would something like this really not have happened? Zhu Yao solemnly said, "You know Nesh Chazerei sect's rules better than me. If you were a Pinta spirit root right from the start, you wouldn't have entered the inner sect, and you wouldn't have a master, nor would you receive the sect master's guidance. In fact, you might even be suppressed by others, and you would be in an even worse state than right now. From the start, you obtained more things than others. These things might not belong to you, but now they are going to be taken away. Are you going to turn around and blame them for not continuing to give?" Little Bai did not speak. The expression on his face grew even more confused. Little Bai. From a human perspective, it's indeed a little unreasonable for them to do this. However, logically speaking, there's nothing wrong with it. It's true that Chu Jiang is your master and disciple, but at the same time, he's the sect master. They had no choice but to do so. As for the others, they were outsiders. Looking at the matter as it stands, he chose the sect's reputation and sacrificed you. There's no one to blame either. In the end, you're just unbalanced. You stood high in the past, and now that you're down, there's naturally a difference. However, what you should really be thinking about is how to climb back up, and not blaming the person who pulled you up for letting go. But what about Grandma? His eyes instantly became misty, and the guilt in his eyes seemed as though they were about to form an ocean. Then what about Grandma? Little Bai can be expelled from the sect. Can he not have anything? But Grandma clearly didn't do anything. Yet, what about Grandma? This child. So she was still the one he was most worried about. Zhu Yao's heart could not help but soften as she stepped forward and hugged this crying youth. "Do you think Grandma will care?" He raised his head. His red eyes were filled with doubt. Those things in Skybond Peak weren't mine in the first place. Right now, I'm merely returning them to their rightful owners. Back then, when she entered the hall, old man Wang Shang had already said this. The things inside were left for Nesh Chazerei sect, and she had never seen them as her own. They respected me as a senior martial ant, allowing me, a foundation practitioner, to have the same status as a demigod sovereign. I enjoyed this status, so I helped them guard Skybond Peak. Now, they no longer need me to guard it, so naturally, I'll return this status. The deal is done. It's very fair. Why should I care? But, Little Bai still felt that something was amiss. However, he could not say it out. You feel that they shouldn't treat me this way simply because you care too much about the opinions of others. Zhu Yao continued. However, cultivation is, after all, our own matters. In this world, there's no one who can't live without another. Without Skybond Peak, can I ask? Can't you cultivate as a deity just because you're no longer in Nesh Chazerei sect? Which rule of the heavenly Tao did it? Or could it be that every deity must have the same resources as Skybond Peak and enter the same door as Nesh Chazerei sect? Little Bai, this world is huge. Not just Nesh Chazerei sect. Carefully look at other sceneries. Don't let the hatred in front of you block your footsteps in pursuing the great Tao. Don't let your inferiority complex become your excuse to not improve. Little Bai's eyes regained some clarity, as though he had understood something. He clenched his fists. But with my current Pinta spirit veins aptitude, how can there still be any hope? Is Pinta spirit veins very bad? Zhu Yao asked. Since she had already decided to groom Little Tyrant into a new role model, naturally, she had to supervise his cultivation. And finding a place with abundant spiritual energy to cultivate was the most basic of all. When his cultivation increased, his name would spread throughout the world, and his prestige would spread everywhere. It was simply so easy. Just thinking about it made her a little excited. Grandma, Cold Imperial City is right in front. Little Bai pointed to a large floating city in front of them. Cold Imperial City is the largest cultivation city in the West Face continent. Are we resting here today? Amen, Zhu Yao nodded. A place with abundant spiritual energy was not easy to find. Furthermore, most of the spiritual veins on the surface were already occupied by the various sections. They could only take it slow. The moment they entered the city, an essence-level disciple who looked like a waiter came to welcome them. Fellow Taoists, are you looking for a place to stay? Our shop's cave residence is spacious, comfortable, safe, and reliable. Furthermore, it's backed by a spiritual vein and is supplied with spiritual energy by the heavenly marquee. He sized up the two of them for a moment, and then focused his gaze on Zhu Yao, who had the highest cultivation. It seems like this is your first time coming to Cold Imperial City. 5 kilometers away from this city is the Bai Lin Forest. No matter if it's searching for treasures or beasts, our shop has various talismans and spiritual pellets for sale. Fellow Taoist, do you want a bottle? No need. We just need to find a place to rest for a while. Zhu Yao rejected. All right. Then, fellow Taoist, this lowly one will bring you to take a look at the cave residence, all right? Thus, the waiter led them into the city. The inns of the cultivation world were different from those of the mortal realm. Most of them were cave residences, and there were no so-called shopkeepers to manage them either. At the entrance of every cave residence, formations of various sizes were set up. If one wished to stay, they just had to place a spirit stone on the formation core at the entrance, and they would be able to enter. One low-grade spirit stone for a night, and when the time was up, the formation would automatically teleport them out. It was fully automated, convenient, fast, and pollution-free. There was even a heavenly marquee inside, and spiritual energy was supplied 24 hours a day. It was basically a holy land that one had to stay in when traveling. Of course, she had to have money. Little tyrant. Zhu Yao nudged by Ziyuan. Pay up. Grandma. His face was filled with guilt. I didn't even bring a storage pouch, so it can't be. You don't even have a single spirit stone? Low-grade ones are fine too. Little tyrant shook his head. Ho ho ho. Fellow Taoist. Zhu Yao chuckled at the waiter. Why don't you give us a comminuted fracture? The waiter's face instantly darkened. Chances of drawing a lottery, it's fine to forward it as well. The waiter's reply was, he immediately chased them out of the city. Thus, they had no choice but to silently build a straw cottage outside the city, feeling that their lives would never be good again. If she had known earlier, she would have dug out a few more bricks. She set up a 5-elemental spiritual energy, spiritual guiding formation for Little Tyrant, and after giving him a few reminders, she returned to the house. She had no choice but to meditate while seriously pondering just how much it would cost to groom an elite. This was a huge problem that concerned the people's livelihood and the country's economy. Not long after she entered a meditative state, she suddenly sensed a hint of energy appearing in her surroundings. It was very weak, as though it would scatter with a single blow. Voices instantly sounded from outside the house. It's dark, let's go scare her, a female voice said. There should be 3,000 small formations within this formation. Moreover, they all had different attributes. It had been running on its own for a long time without the guidance of human spiritual energy. If he wanted to find the person who set up the formation, it would be too late. But ordinary formations, there must be a formation eye and an incantation to operate it. Zhu Yao's eyes shone. You're saying that we can find the formation core in this valley? Yes. If he could find the eye of the formation, he would at least be able to obtain some useful information. Little Tyrant and Yi Qingtsong just happened to arrive, so Zhu Yao immediately grabbed hold of them. He brought them along to search for the eye of the formation. While the barrier was still being repaired, there would definitely be spiritual power fluctuations at the eye of the formation. She immediately expanded her divine sense to the maximum. In an instant, the entire tranquil valley appeared before his eyes. He had thought that it would be easy, but because the barrier was broken, the spiritual energy from the outside had entered, and there were spiritual energy fluctuations in several places. She forgot the location one by one and searched for them one by one. In the end, he found something strange in front of a stone wall. It looked like an ordinary stone wall. It was no different from the stone walls surrounding Tranquil Valley. Spiritual energy was faintly seeping out from it, but it was not very obvious. Strangely, when she scanned it with her divine sense, she could not sense any obstructions at all. However, he didn't feel any obstruction at all. There was only an empty land that extended endlessly. Grandma, what's that? Little Tyrant suddenly pointed at a small piece of broken rock at the bottom of the stone wall. There did not seem to be anything special about the rock at first glance, but after a closer look, she realized that a hint of golden light would occasionally flash past it, as though it was the reflection of sunlight accidentally hitting its surface. However, the frequency of the refraction was a little higher. It seemed like this was the formation core. Zhu Yao immediately landed on the ground with her sword. She took a few quick steps and squatted down to take a closer look at the rock. In the end, it was as though the rock's electricity had been cut off, as it suddenly stopped shining. Could it be her imagination? Little Tyrant, we saw this rock earlier, right? And then he nodded. It's this one. Then why isn't it shining anymore? The barrier in the sky was not completely repaired either. It can't be out of electricity, right? Zhu Yao repeatedly inspected this rock and even used her divine sense to inspect it. There was not the slightest bit of abnormality, let alone the flow of spiritual energy. Could she be mistaken? Zhu Yao inspected her surroundings for a moment. She then stood up and looked at the wide stone wall in front of her. She tried to knock on it. It was a stone wall, and it was rather hard. It did not look like a smokescreen either. Why was there nothing when she used her divine sense to inspect it? Granny! Yi Qingcang suddenly exclaimed, pointing at her feet with a shocked expression. What's wrong? Rock. Rock. I saw it move a little earlier. Zhu Yao was startled. She carefully inspected the rock she was looking at earlier. It was still quietly staying at its original spot, and there was no difference from before. Are you certain? He nodded heavily. Zhu Yao once again inspected it carefully. In so many years, no one had ever discovered this formation, and not even the spiritual monsters knew of it. Could it be because this formation core could move on its own? Wasn't this a little too intelligent? However, after inspecting it for a long while, she was still unable to see anything. She had no choice but to give up. In the end, just as she took 2 steps away, Yi Qingcang once again spoke. It moved again. She had no choice but to inspect it again, but she still did not discover anything. Standing up, Yi Qingcang spoke for the 3rd time. Granny, believe me. Earlier, it moved again. The hell? Are you kidding me? This time, Zhu Yao paid attention and carefully compared it. Indeed, the soil around the rock had loosened by a few millimeters. This rock had really moved. This can't be a rock spirit, right? Zhu Yao pushed the rock and rolled it around. She completely could not tell that it had become a spirit. Little Tsong, your eye disease has to be treated. Granny! Yi Qingcang felt like crying. All right. I believe you. Zhu Yao was annoyed as well. She immediately flipped her hand, and a ball of flames appeared in her palm. Can it move? You'll know once you try. She purposely rubbed the flames closer to the rock. In the end, before she could even touch it, the rock had already rolled far away. The entire rock once again emitted out the golden light she saw earlier. 2 large, sparkling words appeared on the rock like words. Beast. Zhu Yao. Little Tyrant. Yi Qingcang. Was she scolding him? She definitely was, right? Those 2 words even slowly floated up, as though they were a projection. They floated up a meter away. Not only did they become bigger, they became thicker as well. Then, with a flash of golden light, a new line of words appeared. Even rocks are not spared. Yo, what a bad temper. It seemed like it really was a formation core, and it was even an intelligent one. Be obedient and don't move. Zhu Yao immediately grabbed it. Let me take a look. That rock, however, flew up in an extremely resistant manner, and the words on it changed once again. What do you want to do to my body? Why did she feel like she was a tyrant who took liberties with innocent women? She simply wanted to check the center of the formation core. She was just trying to deduce the formation's shape. The rock flew 5 meters away. Don't come over. I'd rather die. Everyone. Just how much did it hate being touched by others? You're a freaking formation core. Do you have to be so chaste? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She immediately cast an art and erected a net of spiritual energy in the air, blocking the formation core stone that was about to escape. With a pull of her hand, the entire rock flew towards her. The formation core stone began to forcefully smash against the net of spiritual energy. However, it was to no avail, and it still had no choice but to fly towards her. The words on the rock began to change as though a screen was being refreshed. "You beast that covets my body, don't touch me. You will regret this. No, don't touch me. Please let me go, please. No. Pain. Zhu Yao. Little tyrant. Yi Ching Song. The hell? Just what version of this rock's intelligence was installed in it? Just what was inside its head, hey? She clearly didn't do anything at all." Zhu Yao's expression darkened as she caught the rock. She could not help but say, "Don't be afraid, I will be gentle." The two little ones. It seemed to be developing in a strange direction. Just as Zhu Yao was about to insert a strand of divine sense into it, the rock in her hand suddenly began to heat up. Zhu Yao was caught off guard for a moment, and her hand trembled as she let go. The rock instantly flew out, emitting out a radiance that was 10 times more dazzling than before. Zhu Yao could not help but narrow her eyes. A row of words once again surfaced on the rock. "You will have to pay the price for violating me like this." Oops. Violating my ass. Fuck. This lady here didn't do anything at all, hey. Also, who would have any interest in violating a rock like you? Just as Zhu Yao was about to step forward and retort, she shockingly realized she could not move her entire body. What was going on? "Grandma!" Little Tyrant suddenly exclaimed. Zhu Yao looked forward, only to see a gigantic golden formation suddenly appearing on the stone wall which did not have the slightest bit of movement earlier. Unfamiliar runes filled the entire stone wall. Before she could even see the appearance of the formation clearly, a huge suction force suddenly assaulted her. Along with Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong, they were all sucked into that formation. A second before entering the formation, she faintly saw a row of new words appearing on the rock. "Other than Master, I will not allow anyone to touch me." In the next second, light flashed in the surroundings. Golden streaks of light were everywhere, flashing towards the back. It was as though her entire body was rapidly advancing. In less than a few minutes, she once again fiercely plummeted downwards. Just as her face was about to land on the ground, the pressure on her body was released the moment she landed. She casually cast a wind art, preventing the three from falling into the fate of being crippled. However, she still fell head first into the mound. Pooh! It had been a long time since she tasted the feeling of lying on the ground. Just as she was about to ask the two little ones about their situation, a female voice suddenly sounded from behind her. Chapter 301. A black-robed woman suddenly appeared in this barren space. She looked extremely bewitching, and her every movement seemed to carry a hint of charm. She raised her hand, as though she wanted to touch the floating rock, but her hand simply passed through it. Her entire figure swayed as well. "Well done, rock spirit." The rock flashed with a golden light, and a row of words appeared on it. "Serve mistress." These people must have died to their heart demons, so they asked for it. It's just a pity for my puppets. However, with this, no one will know about mistress. Eh? The woman's expression changed greatly as she looked at Zhu Yao, who was crawling up with a shocked expression. Why you? How are you all right?" Zhu Yao patted the dirt on her body. "Should I be all right? You. Why aren't you in a deep slumber and trapped in your heart demons?" Her eyes widened, and her face was filled with disbelief. "How would I know?" Zhu Yao rolled her eyes. "Perhaps your heart demon system has short-circuited? Impossible. Everyone has obsessions, and they will fall into a dream when they have desires." She muttered. "Everyone has a heart demon, so how can you not have one? So you're blaming me?" The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. "If you can't figure this out, then don't think about it. Let's have a good chat. Just what are you planning? Let's do this." Zhu Yao immediately sent a bolt of lightning over. With a loud boom, The soul and the rock were instantly charred on the outside and tender on the inside. Rock. What happened to having a good chat? Woman. Same here. Zhu Yao immediately materialized a soul-binding chain and bound the woman's soul. With a flash of lightning, the woman's figure instantly distorted a few times like a picture with bad reception. She slowly turned white and then fell onto the ground. When the rock saw this, a golden light flashed and it charged towards Zhu Yao. She didn't even look at it. She raised her hand and slapped the stone into the ground. The moment she released her demigod pressure, the rock instantly lost its ability to resist. Two words floated on top of it. Ah, it hurts this time. Zhu Yao no longer softened her heart and immediately sat on the rock. She swept her gaze towards the white soul on the ground. Speak. Ambush Nest Chazare sect. Were you the one who made those nascent soul puppets? The woman was unable to resist, but the corners of her mouth curled up into a sinister smile. So what if it's me? Why are you doing this? What is your goal? Zhu Yao continued to ask. The woman did not reply immediately. Her eyes were filled with contempt. Hee, with just you? Do you think you're qualified to know my grand plan? With a twist of Zhu Yao's palm, lightning sparks once again filled her entire body. With just me alone, you are completely unable to retaliate. Speak. What are you trying to do? Who is the master you're talking about? The woman's expression froze for a moment, but she immediately returned to normal. She didn't answer. Though, the rock Zhu Yao was sitting on could not hold it in any longer, as a golden light shone brightly. As though it was afraid that Zhu Yao couldn't see it, the light even tilted to the side, revealing a row of words. Master will not let you off. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment, and she suddenly had an idea. I do want to see how your master won't let me go. Humph. My master is very powerful. Everything in this world must listen to his orders. Yo, who doesn't know how to brag? Where is your master? Call him out for me to take a look. The rock seemed to be anxious, as the golden light shone even brighter. Just as a row of words was about to be revealed, suddenly, the bound soul shone with a bright red light. It instantly broke through her restrictions and flew towards her. Zhu Yao's figure moved, and she retreated several meters back. That woman, however, stopped next to the rock. Her 5 fingers curled into hooks, and she fiercely struck towards the rock. Her fingertips instantly penetrated the rock. Useless. The rock, which was still shining with a golden light earlier, flashed twice, revealing the final row of words. You are not Master's emissary. Then, it completely darkened, and no longer emitted any signs of life, turning into a regular rock fragment. The hell? What's with this situation? Internal strife? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded for a moment. When she recalled that she had to continue controlling the female soul, the red light on her body grew even brighter. This simply looked like self-destruction. The hell? Self-destruction again? Just as Zhu Yao was about to cast an art to stop it, a violent gale suddenly blew around her, instantly blocking her entire line of sight. That eerie, yet slightly complacent voice sounded from within. This world will be mine sooner or later. The 3 realms will be mine. 3 realms? This person's goal is to unify the 3 realms? Isn't that something the devil race often does? As a soul, do you have to be so avant-garde? I advise you, rather than stopping me, why don't you take a look at the 2 people who have fallen into their heart demons? They're destined to die here. The moment those words fell, a huge impact came assaulting her. Zhu Yao immediately retreated to Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong's side, and raised a barrier. A huge explosion resounded. The woman's entire body exploded, and the explosion spread in all directions. Her vision was filled with red light, and her surroundings were filled with thick smoke. Zhu Yao cast a wind-type mystic art, and the smoke slowly dispersed. The place where the woman was standing earlier had already turned into a gigantic crater. She died? What happened to the promised rule over the 3 realms? Was it just for show? Master, let's clear up her doubts. The Heart Demon Mirror artifact satisfies all of your requests. Make it so that you have nowhere to hide. To hell with lies. Heart Demon Mirror artifact, you are worthy of possessing it. The user has the final rights to interpret this product. It's all done by the user. Why did she feel as though she was treated as a paparazzi? Ting. Please choose A. Going alone, B. Going in pairs, C. Going in threesome, D. Going in groups. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. The hell was this shameless choice? Was this not an option for a certain pornographic film? Although she had long known that Realm Spirit's moral integrity was negative, she never expected it to be this negative. With a darkened expression, she clicked on B. That conversation window flashed and instantly disappeared before her eyes. What replaced it was Little Tyrant and Yi Qingcong, who were lying on the ground. Above their heads, suddenly, two video windows popped up like a television, and they were even 51 inches high-definition full color. She felt even more like a paparazzi peeping at someone's private life. What should she do? Sound recording stone? Her master's cold voice suddenly rang next to her ears. Zhu Yao was startled, and she immediately pulled Pee-Pee out. Master! Pee-Pee flashed with a white light, and her master's figure appeared next to her. This floating object is very similar to this sound recording stone in your world. You can see it? Zhu Yao was completely dumbfounded. Why did she feel that her master's personal functions had leveled up after making a trip to her world? Amen. He nodded, took a step forward, and actually pressed the start button without any guidance. Zhu Yao. The screen flashed, and an image slowly appeared. With a single glance, Zhu Yao saw Little Tyrant at the center. So this was his heart demon? The content of the image was a little similar to that precognitive dream she had back then, but the plot was very messy. It started from when Little Tyrant was young. Just as Zhu Yao knew, he was first an outstanding disciple in the inner sect. However, after he failed to build his foundation, and his pentaspirit veins were revealed, he was chased out of the sect. She did not appear, and Little Tyrant became a wandering practitioner. However, because his cultivation had fallen to rock bottom, he was bullied by others everywhere, and his life was very tough. The final image was of Little Tyrant curling up under a broken wall, shivering. Then, a sinister voice resounded. No one cares about you. No one cares about you. It's fake. Everything is fake. Even Little Tyrant's original face began to turn green, and a hint of death aura rose. Little Tyrant. Zhu Yao could not help but call out. The person in the image seemed to have paused for a moment. The curled-up person slowly raised his head. His eyes slowly became clear, and he called out, "Grandma!" In an instant, the entire image began to crack and shatter. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment as well. Her voice was effective. She was overjoyed in her heart. But then, the image changed, and another scene appeared on the screen. The hell, this heart demon, is actually a serial one? P.S. Speaking of which, friends who are reading on QQ, I have seen all of your messages. Every day, I would silently peek at the screen 5 to 6 times, however, because the system is automatically updating over there. I don't have the author's backend, so I can't operate it. I can't speak or leave messages over there, and I can only watch from the sidelines. Chapter 302. The scene on the screen changed again and again. Each time, it was a different life for the two of them, but it was different from the real life. They would always start to spread all kinds of rumors along the way, and then they would start to interrogate the other party. Every question seemed to deepen the other party's despair. It was like a documentary about how many possibilities are there in my life. It was so much so that he spared no effort in leading his life to despair at every moment. Yi Qingcong, who was beside him, was almost the same. Although the content was different, the general method was the same. So this was the inner demon. It was simply a comprehensive psychological intervention, the kind of negative teaching material. Should she be thankful that she had given the two of them a warning, so that the inner demons wouldn't be able to break through their bottom line so quickly? However, as they continued to probe, their minds would eventually be affected by the plot, to the extent that they would be trapped in it, unable to get out. Master, what should we do? This was simply a serial nightmare that could not be woken up. Although they knew it was fake, they would still be affected if they stayed in it for too long. She could see that as the number of times increased, the two of them were increasingly unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. Yu Yin sighed. This is a knot in their hearts. If they can see through it, naturally, their heart mirror will be raised, and their cultivation will improve. If I can't see through it, I'm going to die. It wasn't easy for her to raise little Radish, and it wasn't even ripe yet. How could she watch helplessly as it was scratched by a dog without being able to do anything but watch? Wait a minute. Why didn't she succumb to her inner demons? If Master was said to be unaffected because he was just a trace of divine sense, why was she standing here all of a sudden? This was illogical. Ding. A dialogue box suddenly popped up. Congratulations on discovering a hidden skill, Heart Demon Immunity. This is a passive skill. Obtain title. Bah, you shameless spectator. What the hell was Heart Demon Immunity? This was obviously added later on. Also, was the main point of this sentence the ridicule at the end? What does the bolded font mean? She didn't even have time to complain. Suddenly, the two chat windows hovering above Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong's heads shook. It actually began to move closer to the center, and the two 51-inch HD screens became 102-inch. Was this a cost-saving measure? The images inside were synchronized as well. Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong appeared at the same time, and the contents were the same as well. However, it was possible that the two of them had survived the previous trials. This time, it was different from the miserable scenes in the previous plots. They were actually advancing towards a bright future. What's more, the show lasted for a few hundred years. Both of them formed their nascent souls. However, Yi Qingsong had become the sect master of Nes Chazerei sect, while Little Tyrant had become the sovereign of wandering practitioners. Both of them were famous and belonged to the upper echelons. Just when Zhu Yao was wondering what kind of test this was, Nes Chazerei sect and Wandering City were suddenly attacked. When she clearly saw the ringleader who attacked the two locations, Zhu Yao simply wanted to curse out. What the hell? That extremely familiar face, wasn't it her? Since when did she become a villain boss? On the screen, Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong were both shocked as well. Fortunately, she only flashed on the screen for a moment before leaving. Otherwise, she really wanted to find the demon who made up this plot and talk about life. It was just that this appearance. The scene on the screen instantly changed, and she was being scolded like a dog by everyone inside. Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong's bright future had completely stirred up a storm. The various sects and wandering practitioners surrounded Tranquil Valley with murderous intent. On one side, there were the people who wanted to seek justice. On the other side, there were the benefactors who guided them to success. The two youths were caught in a dilemma. That strange voice once again resounded. Unlike before, which clearly had a temptation to pull people into the abyss, it was calm and only had a single sentence. Which side should I stand on? The hell. She could not help but curse out at the person who came up with the question. This was a little too hard to choose, wasn't it? This was a dead-end problem. If they chose to protect her, if they held a high position, yet they indulged their enemies, they would be letting down the trust the world had in them. If they chose to place righteousness before family, then they would be ungrateful and biting the hand that fed them. No matter which choice they made, it would be wrong. It was basically asking, are you going to let her go and become a heartless bastard? Or are you going to kill her and become a disloyal and unfilial bastard? No matter which choice they made, it was a sign of degeneration. Hell, Zhu Yao could not help but heave a sigh of relief. This should be their final heart demon. The question they came up with was even harder than college entrance exams. Hey, she could only stare at their expressions and look at their final choice. Little Tyrant's forehead was already filled with sweat, and his expression was exceptionally painful. Yi Qingsong on the other side was the same as well. Even the word bug on his face was faintly discernible. For some reason, Zhu Yao had a premonition that the answer to this question was related to whether or not the bug this time could be eliminated. The reason why Yi Qingsong became a bug was because his sins of killing were too heavy, and he had to kill to stop killing. However, due to her forceful interference, he had yet to walk the path of slaughter, and his hands were not stained with blood either. However, no matter which side he chose, he was most likely destined to walk the same path. On the screen, Yi Qingsong was silent for a moment. His expression changed a few times, and only after a long while did he raise his head to look at the furious crowd. She could not help but look at him a few more times. Holding her breath, she waited for his choice. However, he suddenly raised his sword, and his eyes sank. As though he had made some sort of decision, he loudly said, "I am indebted to Granny, so this ye cannot lay his hands on my benefactor. Fellow Taoists are loyal to me, so I cannot betray them. This ye does not have a way to satisfy both sides, nor will I make a choice between the two. I only need to remember that with my life today, I can make up for all my sins." As he said that, he turned the sword in his hand and pierced it straight into his own body. Zhu Yao was completely dumbfounded. He actually gave up on his choice. He did not choose either side and instead firmly guarded his own heart. In a certain sense, he had indeed achieved a way to satisfy both sides. After that strike, the chaotic spiritual energy in his body instantly calmed down. Even the word bug on his face had faded by quite a bit. He could only faintly make out a shallow mark. Zhu Yao was instantly excited. Could this be considered a blessing in disguise? And little tyrant. She hurriedly turned her head back to look at the screen. In the screen, Yi Qingsong had already committed suicide, and his body was beginning to turn transparent. This was the sign of him escaping from his heart demon. Little tyrant was standing right next to him. Strangely, the crowd did not pay too much attention to Yi Qingsong, who had fallen on the ground. Instead, they were all looking at little tyrant who was standing. In the first place, these were just images born in their hearts, so naturally, they would not have too many emotions. That voice once again resounded. "Choose what?" The people in the screen shouted in unison as well. "Choose what?" Little tyrant had a confused look. He inadvertently glanced at Yi Qingsong, who was already dead on the ground, and was stunned for a moment. Raising his head, he swept his eyes across the crowd that was closing in on him. His eyes began to clear up bit by bit, and he suddenly smiled. As though he had thought of something joyful, his laughter rippled out, spreading to every corner. "Choose what? I won't choose anything." He suddenly spoke and gave an answer that no one expected. "Why did I choose such a nonsensical question? I have known my grandmother since I was 10. Although she has a bad mouth, she was the first person who truly cared about me, even if that child was not related to her in the slightest. In this world, she was the only one who maintained a pure kindness, a kindness that the cultivation world had never seen before. In her eyes, it was as though the world was different. Not only did she teach me cultivation, she taught me how to be a person as well. When everyone had given up on me, she was the only one who told me that it was all right. Someone like that, do you think she would attack Nesh Chazerei sect and Wandering City? Stop joking. You're asking me what to choose? I choose to believe her. I believe that she wouldn't do such a thing. I believe that this choice doesn't exist in the first place. I believe that everything here is just an illusion. Zhu Yao was instantly moved. As expected, she did not dote on this child for nothing. He actually saw through the nature of his heart demon. With every word he said, his body would emit out a white light, and it was growing brighter and brighter. Suddenly, with a clang, the screen shattered. It was as though it had broken through something. Yi Qingsong, who was lying at the side, suddenly sat up as well. He panted for a long time, and finally woke up from his heart demon. "You're awake, Granny." Zhu Yao was overjoyed, as she hurriedly turned to look at little tyrant at the side. The hell? What's going on? Clearly, little tyrant was the one who broke his heart demon. So why did she feel like his situation was even worse than before? His body was no longer just covered in sweat. He was even beginning to bleed. "Hey, little tyrant. Don't scare me. Hey, Grandma. Grandma." He struggled to open his eyes. Though he was awake, his expression was even more painful, and the spiritual energy in his body was in an unimaginable mess. He's going to form his Azoth core, Yu Yin solemnly said. This person had just gained enlightenment from his heart demon. So fast? Yu Yin immediately waved his hand, and in an instant, a pathway of flowing light was torn open. There's no spiritual energy here. Help him out to form his Azoth core. Only then did Zhu Yao regain her senses. She hurriedly helped Little Tyrant up and walked towards that pathway. Little Tsong, follow me. Oh. Yi Qingtsong was stunned for a second, before immediately following the three of them into the void that was suddenly torn open. The moment they walked in, a stream of light flashed before their eyes. In the next moment, they had already returned to Tranquil Valley. Let's hurry and leave while the barrier has yet to be completely repaired. Zhu Yao pointed to the tiny hole in the barrier in the sky. Holding Little Tyrant, she flew out on her sword. The moment they left the barrier, the spiritual energy in the surroundings began to surge towards Little Tyrant in a frenzy. Zhu Yao supported him to sit on a flat piece of ground. Little Tyrant, right now, calm your mind and don't think about anything else. Do your best to form your Azoth core, understand? Amen. Little Tyrant nodded. A few traces of blood flowed out from the corner of his lips. Sitting in a lotus position, he began to guide spiritual energy into his body to form his Azoth core. Only then did the rampaging 5 elemental spiritual energy slowly calm down, and they began to gather into Little Tyrant's body in an orderly manner. Zhu Yao placed down a few formations in the surroundings, before taking a few steps back with Yi Qingtsong. Chapter 303. Just like that, Little Tyrant sat there for 3 whole days. 3 days later, the spiritual aura that continuously entered his body slowly calmed down, and the wounds on his body automatically healed, faintly emitting the pressure of a gold core. The pill was formed. A certain master, who had been standing next to his disciple and silently watching everything, suddenly took a step forward. With a wave of his hand, he set up a barrier around his stupid disciple. Zhu Yao curiously turned around. What was going on? Yu Yin silently glanced at him. His pellet is done. I know. Wasn't it obvious? Yao. He sighed and gave her a, "Why is my disciple so stupid?" expression. After forming my gold core, there will definitely be tribulation lightning. Zhu Yao instantly understood. The hell? She had forgotten about this matter. Most probably, she would still be the one being struck. The corner of Zhang Xian's mouth twitched. He silently set up several layers of formations and added a defensive barrier. Master, let me do this kind of thing. She felt that when her master was struck by lightning, he was exceptionally unreliable. He had already dropped the ball a few times. Yu Yin frowned. As though he had recalled some unpleasant memories, he silently approved of her actions. After thinking for a moment, he felt a little indignant. He reached out and pulled his stupid disciple back into his embrace. I can finally be at ease now. Granny, what are you doing? Yi Qingtsong was confused. Was something big going to happen? Or was there an enemy attack? Was there a need to be so cautious? Ho, you will understand in a moment. Zhu Yao gave a bitter smile. Raising her head to look at the sky, her expression straightened. It's here. Yi Qingtsong looked up, only to see the clear sky just now. The sky began to darken, and large patches of thunderclouds gathered. This was the tribulation lightning of the core formation stage. So he was worried that Brother Bai wouldn't be able to overcome the lightning tribulation? Granny, don't worry. Brother Bai has a strong heart. He will definitely be able to overcome the lightning tribulation safely. Zhu Yao replied with 2 words. Ho. She then raised her head to look at the sky. I say, classmate Song, are you sure you won't stay further away from me? There was a loud boom. A snow-white flash streaked across the sky. The tribulation lightning struck down. Towards Zhu Yao, the charred student Yi. 10,000 unknown creatures whizzed past his heart. Wasn't Brother Ziyuan the one who formed his gold core? Why did the tribulation lightning strike Granny? Moreover, Granny seemed to be very clear about this situation. She had already set up a barrier, so the lightning pressure didn't reach her at all. Strike him with all your might. Granny, this was not an immortal technique. Sigh, I told you to stay away from me. Zhu Yao reached out her hand and instantly pulled him into the formation. The thunder in the sky struck even more merrily, crackling and crackling without any sign of panting. Moreover, all of them were aimed at this side. Not a single one landed on by Ziyuan. Student Yi Qingsong felt uncomfortable. Who was going to form their Azoth core? He was full of doubts. He felt a chill in his heart as he felt a chill in his heart. When he turned around, he saw the man next to his mother-in-law looking at him coldly. He instantly felt as if two ice blades were stabbing into his heart. What? Granny seemed to have called him master just now. Why was he looking at her like that? What did he do wrong? It was so cold. How scary. Suddenly, he wanted to go out and be struck by lightning. What should he do? Yu Yin. My disciple's acquaintance, as expected, hateful. 7, 8, 9, 10. Zhu Yao very patiently counted the lightning bolts. Don't even think of tricking me. 99, 81 bolts. Not a single one more, or else it would be a loss. Granny. Yi Qingsong innocently rubbed his hands, which were about to be frozen by a certain someone's gaze, in an attempt to divert his attention. Did you know that this lightning bolt would strike? 15, 16, 17. Zhu Yao counted, but did not hear him clearly. He had no choice but to repeat himself. I'm saying, Granny, are you purposely helping Brother Xion block the tribulation lightning bolts? Purposely? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him. Who the hell wants to purposely do it? Who can purposely do it for me to see? Then the formation you set up earlier was... Zhu Yao glanced at him and sighed with a heart filled with sorrow. It's a habit, young man. What did she mean? Could it be that the lightning bolts struck her on their own? He was startled for a moment. After pondering for a moment, he felt that it was impossible. The tribulation lightning was the embodiment of the laws of the heavenly Tao. How could it possibly strike the wrong person? To be able to tilt the heavenly Tao, just how terrifying of an ability was that? Granny must have been worried about Ziyuan, so she was willing to suffer the tribulation lightning bolts for him. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. Turning to look at that figure whose Azoth core was becoming more and more solid, a hint of envy could not help but surface in his eyes. Actually, in the heart demon, he had heard by Ziyuan's words as well. Speaking of which, both of them were pitiful people. Both of them had the worst qualities out of the 5 spirit veins. Although he was fortunate enough to be accepted into the inner sect, the disdain and discrimination he received was not much lesser than the outer sect disciples. Bai Ziyuan, on the other hand, had fallen from a genius with dual spirit veins to the bottom of the valley. I don't have the intention to criticize you, Zhu Yao continued. It's normal for you to not leave. After all, even if you follow us, you'll just be an inconvenience. Then let me ask you again. If you were Little Tyrant, and I wasn't a demigod practitioner who hid my cultivation, but an Azoth core practitioner, would you leave the sect? No. Yi Qingsong lowered his head. With his personality, even if he discovered that he possessed Penta spirit veins, he wouldn't easily leave Nes Chazari sect. Even if he was expelled to the outer sect, he would think of a way to find an opportunity to stand up again. See, this is the difference between you and Little Tyrant. Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders and said seriously, the reason why Little Tyrant left Nes Chazari sect with me was because he trusted me enough. He believed that Grandma wouldn't harm him. Even if he was expelled from the sect, even if he was turned into a wandering practitioner, even if he had to start cultivating from the beginning, he still trusted me. In fact, when he left, he blamed the sect, blamed his past teachers, blamed everyone, but he felt that he owed me. The first thing he thought of wasn't what he should do in the future. Instead, it was his grandma who doted on him, who suffered grievances because of him. He wholeheartedly believed in me, his elder, his friend, and even his elder sister. So how could I not dote on him a little more? Yi Qingcang was stunned. His face was filled with shock and confusion. He seemed to have understood, yet he seemed to be even more confused. Little Song, tell me, why didn't I choose you? Both of you possess Pinta spirit veins, and your circumstances aren't much different. However, have you ever thought that you and Little Tyrant are different from each other? The two of you have never stood in the same position. In your heart, are you like Little Tyrant, trusting me from the bottom of your heart? Little Song, we're cultivating, but the prerequisite is that we're not deities yet. We're all humans, and humans have emotions. In this world, there's no one who would treat you well for no reason. Without giving, there will be no gains. Little Tyrant gave. He wholeheartedly believed in Grandma. Even when he understood that he would become a bitter, wandering cultivator in the future, he still left with me without any hesitation. However, Little Song, what did you give? Have you ever trusted a person wholeheartedly? If not, why did I choose you? Yi Qingcang was stunned and did not regain his senses for a long while. The echo in his heart grew louder and louder, and it was filled with one word: trust. He had always been alone since he was young. Due to his unyielding personality, he had always relied on his own strength to become stronger step by step. Hence, he felt that as long as he worked hard, even if his talent wasn't good, or his spirit veins were bad, he would still be able to reach the top. He had never sought help from others, so naturally, he did not understand what mutual trust was. Even when he had a fortuitous encounter back then, the first thing he thought of was to hide it. He had no choice but to tell Granny. However, the stronger he became, the emptier his heart became. Especially when he saw Granny and Bai Ziyuan, he felt that he was missing something, and a sense of inferiority would faintly rise within him. He never knew why. So the thing he lacked in the depths of his heart was trust, and the true goal of that heart demon was to let him see this point clearly as well. At that moment, he felt that the things he had been trying so hard to hide and pursue back then were a little laughable. However, his heart was suddenly enlightened, as though he had seen the sun. Zhu Yao, however, widened her eyes in disbelief. Youngster, let me see your face. The bug disappeared. Chapter 304. Zhu Yao could not help but want to raise Yi Qingcang's face to take a closer look. Before he could reach his hand out, he suddenly felt a chill beside him and heard a cracking sound. The formation that she had set up to resist the heavenly lightning instantly collapsed. The dazzling heavenly thunder rumbled and struck the three of them head-on. Zhu Yao, who was stretching out her hand, stopped before he could react. His waist tightened, and he was pulled into an embrace that also smelled of burnt flesh. With a stern look, Yu Yin cast a dirt removal art on himself and his stupid disciple, and then he calmly set down a new formation. The expression on his face did not change. He was so calm that it was as if he was not the one who had just broken the formation. Looking at a certain disciple who was still staring at Yi Qingcang with a dazed expression, Zhang Xian frowned. Reaching out, he pinched her chin and forcefully turned her face around until there was only his reflection in the other party's eyes. He was satisfied. Then, he turned his head and glanced at the unknown object beside him. A cold aura emanated from him. The unknown object, Xiao Song, could only feel its whole body trembling as it broke out in cold sweat, although he didn't know what he had done wrong again. But he vaguely felt that he should move further away. But in the next second, it was already too late for him to think about the reason, because the next bolt of lightning had already struck down, and he was not within the range of the new array formation. Within a day, the Orthodox Immortal sects lost 2 sects, and the disciples of the Shell sect were almost all slaughtered. By the time reinforcements from the various sects arrived, the entire Shell sect was already a sea of blood. Most of the disciples who survived were also in a daze, as if they had suffered a huge blow. No matter how they asked, they couldn't get any answers. Not to mention finding clues about the so-called soul formation evil cultivator. And this was not the end. When the crowd rushed back to Nes Chazere's sect, the scene in front of their eyes stunned them. Nes Chazere's sect, which had been passed down for thousands of years, was destroyed in a single night and was flattened to the ground. Fortunately, the sect's disciples were not heavily injured. The laughable thing was, the ones who saved them from danger were actually the two people who were chased out of Nes Caesare's sect back then. For a moment, everyone from Nes Caesare's sect felt especially upset in their hearts. When Zhu Yao hurried over to meet up with the various sects, she shockingly realized that other than Chu Jiang, there were other people who came out to welcome her. There was actually Chuing as well. It was just that his face alternated between green and white, which was exceptionally fascinating. It was as if he didn't know how to face this little martial uncle of the past. His expression changed again and again. Zhu Yao could not help but look at him a few times. "Thank you, little martial ant, for your help." Chu Jiang bowed towards Zhu Yao. "It's best if you just call me Zhu Yao," she said without a mind. "I'm no longer your senior martial ant. It's a little awkward to hear." Chu Jiang was stunned. Even Chu Ying, who was at the side, froze. After a while, he corrected himself. "Venerable one, thank you for your help. If not for the sovereign's protection, not just Nes Caesare's sect, I'm afraid the entire deity sect would not be able to escape this calamity." "It's nothing. There's no need to be polite," Zhu Yao replied with a smile. Chu Jiang did not continue with the pleasantries either, as he led Zhu Yao into the inner hall. The reason why he intentionally came out to welcome her was actually because he wanted to bury the hatchet between them. He wanted her, and by Ziyuan, to return to Nes Caesare's sect. In a situation where their nest had been destroyed, Nes Caesare's sect indeed urgently needed a protector like this. However, after those words earlier, the other party evidently did not have the intention to return. Naturally, he had no choice but to give up on this thought. When Zhu Yao entered the inner hall, the various clans and sects were already in full swing. When she appeared, they were silent for a moment, before bowing towards her one after another. Zhu Yao nodded in acknowledgement, and then walked towards the seat at the very top according to Chu Jiang's guidance. However, this time, she no longer had to stand. Hua Lin passionately waved at her. "Old fellow Taoist, over here, over here." As he called out, he looked at his surroundings. Realizing that there were no more empty seats left, he rudely pushed an early-stage demigod sovereign on his right. "Hey, sit over there." That demigod practitioner was startled, as though he did not expect that a dignified demigod practitioner like him would be despised so openly. His face turned green from anger. He turned to look at the other demigod practitioners, and all of them turned their heads away as though they did not see anything. He had no choice but to let out a cold snort, as he unwillingly moved to an empty seat at the very edge. "There's a seat here that's empty, hurry and come." Hua Lin shamelessly pointed at the seat that had just been vacated and shouted at Zhu Yao. That practitioner, who had just left, stumbled and had almost fallen. "Even if you're a wandering practitioner, you can't be this shameless, hey." The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Enduring that practitioner's resentful gaze, she sat next to Hua Lin. Why did she feel as though she had unintentionally pulled another circle of hatred? Heretic practitioners are simply too arrogant. Today, they dared to openly attack Origin Wall and Caesare Dawn sect, so they will definitely attack the other deity sects in the future. If this threat is not eliminated, I'm afraid our deity sects will not be able to rest easy. A nascent soul practitioner said with indignation. Even though that's the case, however, there were people who objected. However, heretic practitioners have always been scattered throughout the lands, and they are mixed in with wandering practitioners. It's extremely difficult to find them. Furthermore, after this incident, the various sects have suffered losses. The most important thing we should do now is to recuperate and recover our vitality. When that practitioner heard this, he was instantly enraged. Wait. Just how long do we have to wait? The disciples of my Origin Wall sect have all died in the hands of heretic practitioners. When can we take revenge for this? Furthermore, heretic practitioners must have suffered losses in this incident as well, so we should take advantage of the situation and pursue them. Right now, the enemy's situation is unclear. It's a great taboo to make a move. Another person stood out to object. Just by looking at the situation of Origin Wall sect, we can tell that they were actually able to escape unscathed before we arrived. It can be seen that the strength of heretic practitioners is not to be underestimated. Makes sense, another person said. Back then, the disciple who reported the news also said that there are demigod practitioners among the heretic practitioners. Furthermore, before we arrived, we did not manage to track down a single heretic practitioner. Who knows just how many demigod heretic practitioners there are? But if we ignore them now, they might become even more of a threat in the future. Zhu Yao frowned. She finally understood the reason why these people had gathered here for the past few days. It was none other than one side advocating for peace, while the other side advocating for war. The side advocating for war believed that they should take this opportunity to quickly get rid of the heretic practitioners so that they could peacefully cultivate, while the other side felt that their losses this time were too great, and there wouldn't be any good results even if they were to continue fighting. It wouldn't be too late to continue fighting after they had recovered their losses. Generally speaking, the side advocating for war would usually sacrifice more, like Origin Wall and Cesare Dawn. The side advocating for peace would usually be the other sects that did not suffer any losses. The more Zhu Yao listened, the more conflicted she felt. If they were to continue arguing like this, when would it end? She could not help but speak up. The entire place instantly quietened down. The crowd looked towards her one after another. Towards this new sovereign who had saved the disciples of the various sects, the crowd was still rather convinced. I just want to ask, just who is the heretic practitioner who attacked Origin Wall sect? The crowd was startled, and they began to exchange glances. No one knows? Then why the hell are you guys arguing for? The crowd's faces paled, as though no one had really thought of this question. The place was silent for 2 seconds, before a nascent soul practitioner stood up and said, "Let's not talk about who did it. In short, all heretic practitioners in the world aren't good people. They should be eradicated as soon as possible." The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. This logic was a little too incredible. Then how do you plan on finding these heretic practitioners? He was instantly dumbfounded. Heretic practitioners were, in a broad sense, just another term. They referred to those opportunists, practitioners who did not cultivate using the common way. They were even more unorganized and undisciplined than wandering practitioners. If they did not have an accurate target, how were they supposed to find them with just this term? It wasn't like heretic practitioners would write the words "I'm a heretic practitioner" on their faces. Junior Marshal Sister Zhu's words make sense. Sovereign Wu Fu, who had been sitting at the top, suddenly spoke up. He glanced at her with a smile. Indeed, we should make our move after finding our targets. However, currently, our Nest Cesare sect's Skybound Peak has already fallen into their hands. There are countless treasures inside, and I'm just afraid that heretic practitioners will make use of the treasures inside to expand their strength. Currently, they already dare to openly deal with the deity sect. If they were to grow stronger. Before he finished speaking, the expressions of the people below changed one after another. That's right. Their enemies already possessed such a large amount of resources. If they were to grow stronger, then it would be even worse. In an instant, the practitioners who were in favor of peace began to waver. "Oh, you're talking about Skybound Peak?" Zhu Yao said without a care. "Don't worry, it's not in the hands of heretic practitioners." "It's not?" The crowd was startled. Evidently, they did not believe her. Zhu Yao looked at Chu Jiang and chuckled. "I'm sorry, Sect Master Chu. I accidentally burned that entire mountain." "What?" Wu Fu fiercely stood up, and even the crowd looked at her as though they were looking at an idiot. "You? Why you? Burned Skybound Peak?" Operational error." Speaking of this, she really did feel a little guilty for burning someone else's house. I saw those few heretic practitioners moved Skybound Peak away, so I anxiously chased after them. However, I can't move it back by myself. You guys have to understand that I'm a weak woman. So, ho, you guys understand. Crowd. They didn't want to understand the slightest bit. All right? That was Skybound Peak. The Skybound Peak left behind by an ascended ancestor. There were countless treasures inside. How could it be burned just like that? The people present did not regain their senses for a long while. Every single one of them felt like scratching the wall. All right? So be it. Though, Chu Jiang was the first to regain his senses. Letting out a deep sigh, though his heart was bleeding, he still consoled himself. At the very least, it's better than falling into the hands of heretic practitioners. The crowd looked as though they were about to cry as well. Initially, they had the thought of getting a share of the spoils when they went to the tournament. Who knew that the spoils would be stolen by someone, and then they would be burnt to a crisp? None of them were able to get a taste of it. Their fluctuating emotions were a little too sour. Junior Marshal Sister, are you certain that Skybond Peak was burnt, and not disappeared due to some other reason? Wu Fu suddenly asked with a hidden meaning. Zhu Yao frowned. Other reason? What did he mean? Wu Fu chuckled. This humble one is simply curious as to how such a huge mountain could be turned into ashes. What do you mean? Little Tyrant was instantly enraged. Are you saying that Grandma has embezzled Skybond Peak? I didn't say that. Wu Fu continued with a smile. I'm merely asking a question. Back then, only Junior Marshal Sister and 2 disciples were chasing after the heretic practitioners, and these 2 people. He glanced at Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong. Their relationship with Junior Marshal Sister isn't shallow. As for what happened back then, no one else is clear. When he said that, the crowd revealed doubtful expressions one after another. Indeed, Skybond Peak was filled with countless treasures. How could a normal person bear to burn them just like that? Sovereign's words are too harsh. Yi Qingsong could not help but speak up as well. His tone was filled with anger. If Granny covets the items in Skybond Peak, back then, when she was the only one who entered Skybond Peak, she could have taken whatever she wanted. Why would she have to wait until now? Furthermore, Granny has long become a demigod. What use are the items in Skybond Peak to her? They're useless to her, but that might not be the case for others. Wu Fu intentionally glanced at Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong before continuing. Furthermore, other than pellets and talismans, Skybond Peak is filled with countless mystic artifacts. There are even 10th-rank mystic artifacts. Who wouldn't be tempted? We don't care about the items inside. Yi Qingsong immediately refuted. However, Wu Fu simply snorted coldly and did not reply. When the crowd heard his words, they could not help but look at Zhu Yao with doubtful eyes. Just as Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong were about to speak up, Zhu Yao immediately pulled the 2 of them. Turning to look at Wu Fu, she smiled in a good mood. Sovereign Wu Fu, what you're trying to say is, I hid Skybond Peak, but intentionally told you all to burn it, so that I can monopolize it for myself? Junior Marshal Sister, I naturally believe you. I'm just saying this so that you can explain things a little more clearly, so that everyone can understand. Wu Fu's smile became even more amiable, as though he was saying this for her own good. I don't have anything to explain. Zhu Yao looked at the crowd in the sect and instantly felt a little tired. So seeking justice and slaying heretic practitioners were all empty promises. In the end, they were still inferior to benefits. If Skybond Peak is burned, then so be it. The doubt in the crowd's eyes grew heavier. Zhu Yao continued. However, I indeed did not take the items inside, nor did I hide them. If you really want an explanation, she sized up the crowd, then let me analyze it for you. The items in Skybond Peak are nothing more than a few things. Pellets, talismans, mystic arts, and mystic artifacts. I'm currently a demigod. Unless there's a pellet that can directly allow me to ascend, do you think I'll keep those pellets for no reason and eat them like candies? As for talismans, you all know that I have Penta spirit veins, right? Detonating talismans isn't as fast as me casting my own arts. Unless I have a long life, and am willing to sacrifice speed for speed in battle, I will only use talismans to defend against my enemies and court death. Of course, there's also mystic arts. Just how retarded do I have to be to cripple my current cultivation, pick a new mystic art, and practice it for fun? Then what about mystic artifacts? Wu Fu asked with a sunken voice, and his smile grew even deeper. I believe Junior Marshall's sister is very clear that among the mystic artifacts in Skybond Peak, there are even 10th rank mystic artifacts. In the current cultivation world, there aren't many 10th rank mystic artifacts. I really don't care about them. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him and continued to despise Skybond Peak to the very end. I'm a 10th rank artificer myself. Those inferior artifacts that Wang Shang refined, they don't have the looks, and they don't have the functions. Do you think this old lady will like them? The entire place was silent. You're a 10th rank artificer. Wu Fu was stunned as well. That's impossible. Even the flying sword she used was of the 2nd rank. Which artificer could be as thrifty as her? Taoist Yu is right. Hua Lin stood up and took out the spiritual boat in his hands. This spiritual boat in my hands was refined by her, and she gifted it to me. It's a 10th rank peak-grade mystic artifact. When these words fell, in an instant, everyone present took in a deep breath. Zhu Yao, this really wasn't refined by her. Student Hua Lin's lying wasn't right. The original creator was listening. Chapter 305. With Hua Lin's testimony, everyone's doubts were finally put to rest. On the other hand, Wu Fu's expression sunk. He retracted the smile on his face and stepped forward to look at the magic artifact in Hua Lin's hands. How can a single magic artifact be enough to prove it? Is there a mark on it? This time, even Hua Lin could not help but frown. I said that she was the one who refined this Dharma artifact. So naturally, she refined it. Wu Fu still didn't believe it. I just feel that it's a little unreal for him to take out a top-grade 10th tier artifact right off the bat. Moreover, since he's a 10th tier artificer, could it be that he only has a single artifact? You want to see my other works? Zhu Yao glanced at him. Junior sister, please give me some pointers. Are you sure? Zhu Yao asked again. Wu Fu frowned, but still nodded his head. All right then. Zhu Yao sighed. Actually, back then when I was at Skybond Peak, I had practiced quite a few mystic artifacts. I just didn't bring any with me. Wu Fu's face lit up, and it was clear that he did not believe her words. He said sarcastically, "That's really unfortunate, but..." Zhu Yao's tone changed. "I didn't bring it with me, but that doesn't mean others didn't bring it with them." What do you mean? Wu Fu's expression changed, and he instantly had a bad premonition. What I'm saying is, all of the things I've refined have been placed in Skybond Peak. I didn't bring a single one with me. Zhu Yao looked at the crowd. After so many years, I believe there will definitely be 1 or 2 disciples in the sect who will take a fancy to the mystic artifact I refine, take it for a trial, and bring it along with them. Humph. You're saying that some of the artifacts on Skybond Peak were refined by you? You don't believe me? Zhu Yao chuckled. It's fine if you don't believe me. However, I had just learned an interesting spell formation, so I integrated it into these magic tools. If you want to use these magic tools, you must first chant an incantation. Whether there is or not, I will know once I recite this incantation. After saying that, Zhu Yao did not care about his instantly changing expression and immediately shouted into the hall, "Chung Qingdiao, you damned pervert." His words fell. There was a flash of light. Instantly, a dozen or so Dharma artifacts rose into the air and floated in the air, emitting white light as if they were responding to her. Even Wu Fu's storage pouch, a rank 8 defensive artifact in the shape of a bell, flew out. Zhu Yao turned to look at him. Zhang Xin chuckled. Looks like senior apprentice brother Wu Fu also likes these magic tools that I've refined. By the way, do you want me to repeat the specific functions of these artifacts and the way to refine them? After all, you've been carrying it with you for so long. This is the first time I've learned how to use the curse, so it's inevitable that there will be times when I'm not used to it. Wu Fu's face instantly turned green and purple. It was extremely interesting, and he didn't make another sound. Instead, the gazes the various sects looked at Nes Chazere's sect with had instantly changed. They were clearly using a mystic artifact made by someone else, yet they were still accusing them of stealing. Nes Chazere's sect's actions were truly embarrassing enough. In the first place, Zhu Yao did not want to embarrass Nesh Chazere's sect like this either. After all, it could be considered as her former master. However, with Elder Wu Fu biting onto her without letting go, she was a little enraged. Furthermore, that Skybond Peak had almost caused the death of the monsters in Tranquil Valley. Because of this, Little Eighth had exhausted the godly energy he had gathered with great difficulty and had yet to wake up. As for those magic tools, they were indeed refined by her after she came out of that space. Although Little Eighth had reincarnated, she still hated the pervert Cheng Qingdiao from the bottom of her heart. Hence, with nothing better to do, she secretly learned Wang Shang's method and refined a batch of mystic artifacts. Then, she pestered her master to teach her this incantation and infused it into the mystic artifacts. However, who would have thought that the mystic artifacts she refined were even more popular than the ones in Skybond Peak? These nascent soul and demigod practitioners of Nesh Chazere's sect actually had one each. Wu Fu could be considered as the #1 person in the cultivation world to be so cooperative when it came to scamming himself. Sovereign, how do you think we should deal with this heretic practitioner? After circling around for a while, the crowd finally returned to the main topic. Probably because they had just found out that she was a 10th rank artificer, they faintly felt that she was their leader and began to ask for her opinion. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment. I feel that no matter if we fight or rest, we must first find out who the culprit was that destroyed Energy Shell sect. The crowd nodded. Indeed, finding out the culprit was the most important. But most of the disciples of Energy Shell sect have already met with misfortune, and those who were fortunate enough to survive have all gone mad. With this clue cut off, I'm afraid no one has seen the appearance of the culprit. That might not be the case. Sect Master Gu of Energy Shell sect suddenly stood up. As though he had thought of something, he said with an excited look, I recall that the core of the Great Mountain Barrier Formation in the sect is an entire piece of sound recording stone. Usually, because it's placed on the core of the formation, it needs to provide the circulation of the formation, so it can't be used. However, when the heretic practitioner attacked, he just happened to destroy the Great Mountain Barrier Formation. Once the formation is destroyed, the sound recording stone is unable to maintain the spiritual energy of the formation. You're saying that this piece of sound recording stone might have recorded everything that happened back then? The crowd had excited looks. If the sound recording stone hasn't been destroyed, Sect Master Gu nodded. Bring us to the core of the formation. Zhu Yao immediately pulled Sect Master Gu out of the door. The crowd exchanged glances and immediately followed after. Even the demigod practitioners at the back followed after. Wu Fu's expression sank, and he had no choice but to follow after the crowd as well. As Zhu Yao flew, she saw the sound recording stone that Sect Master Gu spoke of from afar. How was that a piece of stone? It was clearly a stone wall. It was no wonder Shell Wall sect would use such a common material as the core of the formation. It was an entire broken mountain, and the stone on the broken wall of the mountain was an entire piece of sound recording stone. Furthermore, it was facing Shell Wall sect. Sect Master Gu inspected it carefully for a moment. Other than a few traces of blood on it, it was not damaged at all. Hence, he hurriedly cast an art and transmitted it into the stone wall. A bright light flashed, and a blurry image faintly appeared from within. It grew clearer and clearer, and it was the image of the day their sect was annihilated. The crowd could not help but widen their eyes as they carefully looked at it, afraid that they would miss out on any details. When they finally saw the scene on it clearly, they were all dumbfounded. They simply could not believe their own eyes. There were even people who began to rub their eyes, wondering if they were seeing things. In the entire image, corpses were strewn everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. It was exactly the same as what they saw when they first arrived here. The only strange thing was, there were no heretic practitioners. Forget about heretic practitioners, there wasn't even a character that could be considered as a villain. All of them were disciples of Shell Wall sect, and they were actually killing each other. And, occasionally, the light of self-destruction would light up. Furthermore, every single one of them had crazed looks on their faces, and they were all shouting out loud. Unfortunately, the sound recording stone could not record voices. The one who was the most shocked was none other than Sect Master Gu. His entire being was dumbfounded. What's this? An internal strife? Someone voiced out his doubts. That's impossible. Sect Master Gu hurriedly shook his head. My sect has always been harmonious. How could there possibly be internal strife? Furthermore, look at the two over here. This is my sect's elder Yu, and his opponent is his own son who had just formed his Azoth Corps. It was indeed a little strange for a son to make a move against his father. Zhu Yao took a closer look. These people looked a little similar. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.